0549 986 996. 0549 986 996. That's where you can send your WhatsApp. For those of you who prefer Twitter, you can send me a tweet on the official station Twitter handle at City973. At City973. The hashtag is the big issue. You can do the same on my own Twitter handle, Godfred Akoto-Boafo at East Sportsman. Very easy as well. The hashtag remains the same, the big issue. Hashtag the big issue. For those of you who are watching us via Facebook, you can also leave your comments in the comments thread. We will get to them and read them for you. As usual, we always say, keep the language civil. That is all that we ask of you. And also keep the messages on topic. Sometimes you realize the messages are on things that we are not discussing, so it makes it hard to read on the show. If you want us to read your messages on the show, please make sure your messages and your questions and your suggestions are on topic. And also, if indeed you do miss out watching us live, don't worry. You can always catch us via playback on our YouTube channel, CityTube, CITITUB, that we have here at 97.3 City FM and at City TV. So eventually you don't miss out on anything. Okay. Education, and like I explained earlier, we'll be doing this in two parts. Now, in education, there are a lot of things happening. So there's the discussion to reopen schools. We've heard from stakeholders from the teaching side earlier in the week who had said that they were not ready because they did not feel that preparations had been put in place. Indeed, the government has also spoken on that matter. And the Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, Minister for Information, indeed has addressed that. It says that no date has been set for schools. We'll also hear from the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools, CHAS, who are proposing a mass COVID-19 testing of students and non-teaching staff. So we'll hear from those two. Also on the show, like I said, it's not just opening at that level. Universities are also involved in this. We'll reach out to them as well for two things: how universities can return back to the class, to the lecture halls, I must say. And also there's a matter of policy when it comes to the Public Universities Bill. A lot of people seem to be overlooking that one, but it's been in the news heavily this week as well. So I'll be looking at all these matters when it comes to education. So first of all, let's listen to Kojo Nkrumah talk about government's plans going forward for education, and then we'll hear from CHAS as well on this. And then we will also hear from Mr. Angel Carbonu, who speaks for NAGRAT, that is the National Association of Graduate Teachers, on the plans for returning to the classroom.
There's also a second reportage I need to clear up, that schools are to reopen soon. We have observed from our Media Monitoring Center lots of reports that say that government says that schools are to reopen soon. With the greatest of respect, it is not correct. Government is not saying that schools are to reopen soon. What we are saying is that consultations on what it takes to reopen schools is what we are currently engaged in. If there's been a misspeak or something of the sort, just to put it in its right context, consultations on what it takes to reopen schools as part of the potential easing of the general restrictions that we are living under are what have started. Now, we notice that there are a lot of stakeholder groups and parents and unions that appear a bit apprehensive since those reports came out. It is okay to be apprehensive. Indeed, if we were not apprehensive, then we will not be sensitive to the challenges of the time. It is okay to be apprehensive. It is okay to have worries. It is okay to wonder how this will be done. But we must channel those apprehensions and those worries towards answering the question, what does it take? What should be the indication of a good time? What will be the best way to protect teachers, non-teachers, students, if we can do many things that we put our minds to. And yes, this is a complex global problem, but if we put our shoulders to the wheel, the best of our creative juices and the positive spirits that we have can help us come to the line of best fit on what to do if we decide to ease some of these restrictions.
Following the outbreak of COVID-19 and the subsequent announcement by President Akufo-Addo to close down schools, educational institutions have been virtually empty. While some have been using virtual platforms to continue with academic work, some are yet to make use of these platforms, as access to internet has been a challenge for many. In order to make up for the lost contact hours, some are advocating for schools to reopen, while ensuring that all necessary safety protocols are adhered to. For the president of the University Teachers Association of Ghana, Professor Charles Ofosu-Malfo, he believes some measures can be put in place for universities to reopen for final year students to complete their courses while observing all precautionary measures.
From discussions, it seems to me that UTAC will be okay if there's some strategies put in place to open the universities in particular. And so for our little ones, I don't think we are for that position. But when it comes to university, we think that we could have something like a piecemeal kind of agenda, especially so that we can finish the second semester.
For some university students, schools should not reopen as they fear it could bring about a second wave of infections.
This university, K University, can boast of 60,000 population, and these people, a lot of people know themselves. They greet themselves, they hug themselves. Well, they are supposed to know better, but sometimes they forget. And we as in schools, we should wait for some medicine that can cure it or prevent it. So I'm hoping that by August, in case we are going to resume, that will be cool for us.
Professor Charles Ofosu-Malfo adds that most universities do not have robust virtual platforms in place to enable smooth academic work online, hence the inability to adopt e-learning fully as an alternative. He wants government and all stakeholders to use COVID-19 as an opportunity to encourage online studies. But what is the position of various heads of public senior high schools across the country on the reopening of schools? Alhaji Yakub Abubakar is the national president of Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools.
We made the authorities aware that if schools are to reopen, then the students and teachers who are to come to the school should first of all be screened and their positions known. In other words, those who are negative, they are welcome to come to school, and those who are seen to be positive, immediately the necessary. We have also requested that certain things be put in place to ensure the safety of the students. First and foremost, schools in general have crowded situation. So we've suggested that given the current situation that we are in with the COVID-19, we should first of all start by allowing the final year students, those in Form 3, to come to school, so that we shall use them to test the situation and see.
Some parents also spoke to City News.
For those who are about to complete the senior, either the senior or the GHS level, those who are about to write, final year students, can be allowed to go on a stream and start learning so that they can prepare themselves for the exams. In that, for them, they are matured enough, and the number two is manageable. So the school authorities can manage the intake as to the social distancing and all those tasks.
Media come ko umunya botre niya mani mere if you say nkola ko school akola no ko ankaso ono ko akotin ho adi agro oni ni nua bi anasa na damfo be ko akodi agro no onim se ni nua no obi ni nua no so nim se obi e china e be ba be he omo no e bi ankola no bi no we obi.
We want to be supported by science and statistics, because the fact that these things are even present, though it helps tone down the effect of the disease, there are other factors. Students in dormitories, students in classrooms, the exuberance of these students at this very critical age of their lives, the fact that they will not be able to observe these protocols adequately and effectively, the fact that if even only final year students are in school, total population of final year students in a particular school will be about 1,000 or 1,000, some schools 1,500, some schools 1,000. If these students congregate and there is infection, you will be surprised that within a number of days, when contact tracing is done in the school, you may end up collecting all the students and sending them to a quarantine area. Our proposal is that until the situation changes, until it is evidently clear that our numbers are beginning to come down and that infection rate is beginning to come down, we don't think it is advisable for the schools to reopen.
So you've heard the varied opinions of stakeholders in the educational sector. You've heard from students, you've heard from lecturers, you've heard from teachers, you've heard from parents. You can tell us what you think. Send your messages via the WhatsApp line 0549-986-996, 0549-986-996. Well, let me come in studio and start the first part of the conversation. And I'll do that with Professor Appiagyei Etua, Professor Kwadwo Appiagyei Etua. He's a member of UTAG. He's a law lecturer at the University of Ghana Law School. He's in studio with me. I will also be joined by Angel Karbonu, President of NAGRAT, Kofi Asare from the Africa Education Watch, and Enoch Jetia, who's President of the Ghana National Council of Private Schools. So I will begin the first part of the show with them, and then in the second part of the show we'll do it with Peter Boama Utukuno, who's the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, and the Member of Parliament for Sekondi, Honorable Andrew Mercer, to discuss the politics of the voters' ID card. Okay, so just hold on to your seats, put on your seatbelts, and let's begin this. Professor Appiagyei, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Kofi Asare, good morning.
How are you?
I am well, Kofi. And Mr. Jetia, good morning, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Godfrey. I'm doing great, and you?
I am doing well as well. I guess I'll begin the conversation from Kofi. Now, Kofi, the conversation has been this week, how do we get back? And I've seen a memo from your outfit putting together suggestions. It wasn't too detailed, but is it a conversation that we should be having at this point, to start with?
Yeah, Godfrey, it is worldwide. That is the direction of discussions in this COVID era. And Ghana cannot pretend not to be part of the global order. In all the countries, there are discussions about how to reopen school, and then when it is likely, reasonable and safe to reopen schools. This morning I was having a chat with Uganda. They have set the 4th of June for reopening. I know South Africa is opening on the 1st of June. Namibia is opening, I think, on the 2nd of June or so. Cote d'Ivoire is opening on Monday. There are some countries that are still in lockdown, like Liberia. But then basically the discussion about how to ease restrictions, especially within the education sector, and allow, most importantly, the finalists to go to school, is a global discussion ongoing. So these countries I mentioned, for instance, the emphasis is on getting the finalists. That's the junior high school, in our case, junior high school 3, and then there's WASC 3, senior high school 3 students to go and write their WASC. And so it is not about opening schools today or tomorrow necessarily, but it's about beginning to generate a discussion and generating it from the community level, led by parents. And we said led by parents because post-Ebola, Sierra Leone and Liberia, for instance, and post-SARS in most of the Asian countries, evidence from the World Bank has shown that about 25% of children did not return to school because of the lack of confidence in the mechanisms that governments claim they have put in place to make their children feel safe in school, and other social factors. And so it's very, very important not to conduct an outreach when school reopens and there's apathy, no. But it's very, very important to involve parents, parent associations, SMCs, PTAs, at the secondary level and also at the basic level, at the initial stage of the conception of this debate, so that any decision leading to whether or not we are reopening and when and what measures we should put in place would have had their critical involvement and consensus, guaranteeing the state that should the state put in place the supply factors, which is putting in place a congenial school environment, which is water and sanitation and hygiene compliant per COVID-19 standards, and putting in place a teaching force that is COVID-19 compliant and ready. If all these things are put in place, then the assurance will be that the demand side, which is the parents enrolling their children, would have been met at a reasonable equilibrium, and education can conveniently go on. And so we have called for that discussion not to happen at the policy level alone, but also to happen aggressively at the community level involving parents.
Okay. Mr. Jetia, you head the Ghana National Council of Private Schools, and you've taken some flack in the past week or so for saying that, look, your teachers are suffering, let's open the schools. But the question needs to be asked, and Mr. Asare alludes to that. There are significant barriers. What is the best way of getting through some of these barriers, at least to convince parents that now is the time it is safe to allow my child to enter a classroom?
Okay, thank you very much. Our argument that we are making is not based on that our teachers are staying home, and for that matter, they are suffering. So government, whatever, good or bad, government is supposed to lift the ban and reopen schools. But our argument is on the point that COVID-19 has come to stay. There's a need also to find out the best way to go to our normal activities and at the same time contain the virus and stop it from being spread. We know very well that when we talk of education, a child age matters in this kind of regard. People are saying that life and all this is true, but when things are not being put in place, we will not be able to, materialize the age group that the child has found itself. So, what we are trying to say is that before the school be called to session, there should be some mechanisms that should be put in place. And other people were saying they are not ready to go to school. And we are saying, look, it is not like you are not ready to go to school. Let us put measures in place and see the best way to combat the COVID-19, from the fact that the disease is more or less like a cholera or let's say a fever that has come to stay with us. And what are some of the measures that we are proposing? We are proposing that so that we can win the confidence of the parents. Because if you look at our educational, let's say, setup, as Kofi Asare was saying, the major issue is the congestion issue. How do we ease that congestion issue? Mm-hmm. So we are proposing a shift system.
Even at the private school level?
No, we are across the country. We are looking at, you see, when you look at the COVID-19 and school issues, it's not all the areas that school are operated that the COVID-19 has found itself there. Mm. There are certain regions that the COVID-19 has not been fully tested as compared to, let's say, certain regions that are very choked in terms of numbers. If you look at Greater Accra, Kumasi, as compared these two regions to, let's say, Ahafo and let's say Western North or let's say Uti region, obviously you see that the numbers that are within these two regions like Uti and Ahafo are very minimal. And for that matter, the enrollment aspect of, let's say, students in those areas are also minimal. But as compared to Greater Accra and then Kumasi, you see that the numbers are much voluminous. And for that matter, there is a need to employ something like a shift system that will ease the congestion. So if, let's say, students in the Greater Accra are observing the shift system, we can therefore blend the e-learning and the face-to-face learning to meet their educational needs. And then wherever they are not, the population is not all that dense, like for the region I have cited, they can also observe the social distance, because even when you go to one school, you observe that the total enrollment in that school is 150. Mm-hmm. From class 1 or let's say the kindergarten 2 or kindergarten 1 to JHS 3, the total enrollment is 150. And these 150 numbers being distributed in various classrooms. So definitely we can easily ease congestion and students can go to their normal life of education delivery, so simple. But when we come to where the population is very dense, like Greater Accra, Eastern region, Ashanti region, and other let's say, enclosed regions, we can look at measures like shift system, where it will be in the morning session and then afternoon session. So 3 hours in the morning session, and then 3 hours in the afternoon session. And then when you come to the house, you continue your face-to-face e-learning, or let's say the e-learning. So it's a blend of the e-learning and then the face-to-face learning. That is what we are proposing.
Okay, thank you for that initial comments. We will interrogate some of these things, and let's go to the tertiary side of things. And Professor Zakwaja Piajoetia is here. He teaches at the University of Ghana. Are these suggestions that make sense to you at the tertiary level? I heard the UTAC president, and you're a member of UTAC, say perhaps it might be good to consider it from the graduate level and then work your way down.
Yeah, I think it's likely to be more manageable at the tertiary level because of the level of maturity of the students. However, the key problem for me is not the classroom, but it's more in the hostels, where you have 4, may create some problems. In the classroom, I think if we focus on the final year students, we'll be able to face them in such a way that it wouldn't create a problem. Of course, at the faculty of the School of Law, for example, we wouldn't have much of a problem because our numbers are low. But for a class of 800, 400, it will create a bit of a challenge. However, the space is there. If it's only the level 400s who are being brought in first, there could be more lecturers coming in to space them, and then they can teach them in such a way that it wouldn't create a problem. But also at the university level, online teaching is ongoing.
Is it being effective? We've had mixed reports of the efficacy of that.
Yes, there are some challenges. We are using Zoom, we are using Sakai, we are using Microsoft Teams. All this, there's a good way of interacting with the students. But some are complaining. Some say, I don't have a laptop. Some say, I don't have a smartphone. And some of the free data that the university has been giving, for some it doesn't work. I myself, I was given a SIM card, but it has never worked. So I've been using my own data to teach by way of Zoom, and sometimes I even teach by way of WhatsApp, where I copy my slides and put them on the platform. They read if they're okay with it. If they need explanation, sometimes I record a brief message to explain, or I just type and explain it to them. So these are how we've been managing.
In terms of supervision, how difficult has it been to understand, as a teacher, how difficult is it to teach this way, the digital style of teaching that you are employing now?
It has its challenge. It also has its good sides. The challenge mainly is the fact that it's difficult to supervise the students, even if whether they are present in the Zoom class or the WhatsApp class. It's difficult to tell. Of course, for my WhatsApp class, for example, before I start, I ask everyone to send a note saying that I'm present. But at the end of it, you don't know if you have to repeat the same thing, and it's a tall list. So you are not able to tell who stays in up to the end of the class. So there's a challenge there. But the exciting part of it is that students get more involved in the teaching, in the sense that they get to read more, they are giving assignments, they are writing papers, and so on. So I think it gives them more opportunity to study and explore and bring out their views in the form of papers and assignments that we give them.
Okay, now let's get to, gentlemen, all of you, let's get to dealing one by one with the suggestions of how we can go back and the associated pros and cons. Let's start with infrastructure. Now, Mr. Jitoa has made reference to the infrastructure being different across the country. So there are places with high population densities that need to be shifted, need to run a shift system. There are those in other areas that might not. Kofi, with regards to the design of even our schools, some have said to create that confidence that you are talking about, to not get the numbers where parents are afraid to send kids back to school, the first point of call might be a significant investment in redesigning some of our classrooms. It's not just a shift system, but even redesigning the classrooms by itself and the infrastructure within, how the chairs are. We see a lot of dual desks, especially at that level. Not at the university, they use the pew kind of style, but at the primary school and senior high school level, we have the dual desk system. How do you sanitize those? Sanitation itself is a problem. Supply of water to these institutions are a problem on a daily basis. How do we go through that one in the first place? Quickly enough to assure parents that I can send my kid to school A or school B before we even consider a shift.
Yeah, definitely we have challenges. As a nation, we have hugely undeveloped education infrastructure, especially in most rural areas. But you see, some of the solutions can be mobilized locally. For instance, when it comes to water, local communities, if properly engaged by the GES through the SMCs, should be able to provide water for schools that their own children will be attending.
But for communities that don't have water for themselves, to provide water?
No, there's no community that hasn't got water for themselves. There are communities that don't have potable water, but water for themselves, otherwise they will die.
No, I'm just saying,
So
yes.
There's always a place that you go and fetch water. That's what I'm saying. And those children are also always involved in fetching water before they go to class anyway. And so if we mobilize the SMCs, as I mentioned, if we mobilize the SMCs properly, in communities that I've worked before, where there was no water and the school had to be wash compliant, that's water, sanitation and hygiene compliant. I mean, always the SMCs mobilized the community to fetch water for the school. So it is something that can be done so that we leave the procurement issues to the government. And then when it comes to the hardware part of the equation, you see, the classroom desks are dual desks, I know. And if I look at an average GES classroom at the basic level, I can say that if you have to space it per UNESCO WHO recommendation of 1 meter ahead, 1 meter behind, 1 meter east and west, you might end up having a maximum of about 25 desks in a class, which is 25 children.
Yes.
And so it is likely that for most of the schools that are in peri-urban and urban areas, you will definitely have more than one shift. That is anticipated. And that is why we are saying that when this discussion is had, there won't be a straitjacket approach to batching students. No. It may depend on the class size in a particular municipality. Average class size. Some municipalities have higher class sizes when they are peri-urban especially. So that we localize the solutions where you can have 3 batches. In some countries like Switzerland and Netherlands, for instance, they have about 3 batches going to school. You go to school for 2 days. So batch 1 can go to school for 2 days, 2 can go to school for 2 days, and then the 3rd batch can go to school on Friday. But they will not do 4 hours, they can do 8 hours. So batch 1 can do 4 hours on Monday, 4 hours on Tuesday, batch 2 can do 4 hours on Wednesday, 4 hours on Thursday, and then Friday batch 3 can go. So depending on the municipality's standard class sizes, we may have to batch not only morning and afternoon shift, but also one could go, a 3rd batch could go on the odd day, on Friday, so that we can reasonably distance the students in line with WHO and UNESCO protocols. So that's how we are seeing it at the basic level. For me, the basic level issue is not so much of an issue than the secondary level. The secondary level is the key issue because that's where, as Dr. Chiahini said, you are having to deal with people both in the classroom and also in the dormitory. And so as you batch students in the class, the batching must correspond with an equal measure of reduction in the dormitory. And not only so, but also in the dining hall. We heard of how the food processing factory in Tama, had the infection. Yeah. And one of the hotspots, according to the virologists, was the dining room where they ate. And they sat in batches of, I think, 6 around the table. And we know in our secondary schools, we do more than 6 around the table.
Yeah, it's 20 around the table.
Exactly. So the secondary school one is more an issue that we need to take a meticulous, very, very careful look at. But no matter how we approach the issue, we definitely will have to batch track A and B, batch green track A and B. And then if it's a single track school, you make it a double track school. That is the only way you can halve, at least halve, the number of people in the class, looking at the average class sizes in our secondary schools and in our basic schools.
But Kofi, that also might create a problem, considering that parents might say, okay, are we not creating a certain level of inequality in learning here, for instance? Because we do take our children to school for a certain kind of quality of education. But if we go in there, like I say, we are doing 3 hours here, 4 hours here, you've also suggested that municipalities have different problems. So if, for instance, a municipality in the Bono region, which has no case, can move ahead full steam, but a municipality in Accra, for instance, which is a hotspot, can only do 2 hours a day at the same level, don't we have a significant problem? Are we not creating another problem?
Fantastic. That particular concern of parents may be born, it's definitely within context, and it's very reasonable. But parents will have to also appreciate the fact that the attempt to open school in phases or in batches is actually an attempt to mitigate the existing inequality, which has been occasioned by the rollout of an e-learning system in a country where 1/5 has no electricity. You understand? And so the parents themselves should appreciate that this intervention, which is likely to cause a reduction in the quality of education that they have paid for, or they pay for, whether it is free or not, they pay for through their taxes. It is actually an intervention to try and mitigate or reduce the impact of the inequality being perpetuated and being widened with the introduction of an e-learning system which has no way of ascertaining whether Kofi Asare is actually participating in this class or not, because the TV is not looking at me, I am looking at the TV. Let me say that research suggests that 4 hours of instruction in an interface engagement between a child and a teacher is more impactful in terms of learning than 2 weeks of the child watching TV and pretending to be learning. 4 hours of an interface engagement between a teacher and a child is more impactful on the child's learning than 2 weeks of watching a lesson on TV, because the TV one is not interactive. Yeah. Because the TV one, there is no way the teacher is able to ascertain whether the child is participating or not. There is no way for feedback, and it is not participatory. And so even though we may be reducing contact hours worldwide, globally, the major impact, the major impact and the dimension of that impact of COVID on education is the reduction in time on task, because you will have to batch schools or track schools. And so that is the denominator, that everywhere you are reducing time on task. And that is why we recommended that measures including accelerated learning methodologies will have to be deployed. The GES will have to give some orientation to the teachers, not only on how to provide psychosocial support to students, especially those with gender-related vulnerabilities and also persons with disabilities, but also enhance their capacity in how to use accelerated learning methods to teach. So that all you would have taught in 3 days or in 2 days, you would find a convenient in quote way to teach the same thing within 4 hours. And so there are always alternative approaches to teaching in a time efficient way when you find yourself in such an emergency. And I hope that we are going to avert our minds to that and deploy these innovative strategies aimed at being a stopgap measure in the midst of the crisis. When things normalize, obviously we are going to teach normally. Okay,
let me go to you now, Mr. Jitwa. You head the Ghana National Council of Private Schools, and there are those who have said that if there is a group within the pre-tertiary level that stands a chance of reopening first, it will be those in your zone, the private schools, because you have better infrastructure. You have basically that is the significant advantage you have. But what do you think should be the consideration for what phase we should reopen first in terms of class level. There are those who have said, let's open for maybe the KG side. There are those who have said, let's open for JSS side. There are those who have said, let's open for Form 3s at the senior secondary school side. And they all have advantages and disadvantages. What would be the biggest consideration in making that determination?
Okay, thank you very much. The determination or the consideration will be based on the availability of, let's say, in the infrastructure within that locality, as Kofi was saying, because we understand, and I agree with you perfectly, that the private schools infrastructures stand a step further than the public schools, and that does not also mean that everywhere all the private schools are in good infrastructures. And for that matter, they can have uniformity of, let's say, a group or a level to be considered. What we can do is that if there is, let's say, a district or let's say a school which has infrastructure that can contain the distances. You see, UNESCO and WHO has come out with their requirements and, let's say, 4 cardinal points, which the first one is the distances, the social distances protocols. And then the second one is taking the basic temperature of all the students regularly and making sure that the space is very airy. So if a school meets this kind of, requirements and can contain them, and looking at the number, because as one school can have over 1,000 population as a private school, and one school can also have, let's say, 150 students. So that school, the school that is having 150 students, can open for all the students on that, let's say, department, let's say KG department, primary department, and senior high school department. So it will be based on the preparation and then availability of the resources that will determine the level that the child, or let's say the level that the school will start from. However, there are other suggestions saying that because of the examination, that the BEC and the WASI examination, there are other suggestions that we should allow these final year students go to school so that they can prepare and end their career in that course. It's a very good idea, but the most important thing is the availability of the resources that can harness the social protocol distances, and then make sure that the school will not create a hotspot for the spread of the disease.
Okay.
Let me also touch on one of the issues concerning the dormitory issues that Kofi raised, that we have to look at it critically.
Professor Chia has also raised the issue of accommodation, even at the university level.
Yes. You know, one thing we have to look at it critically is that at this point, we are not in a normal times, and we have to think 360 to sketch and bring or scheme and bring all available resources that can help promote or, let's say, solve the challenge that we are going through. And one thing I will propose is the PPE, that is the PPP, the private public partnership. You know, when the isolation centers were so congested, basically the hospitals, government resorted going to other schools to be used as isolation centers. And those who were quarantined during the lockdown, government used some of the private, let's say, hotels to manage them till they were out of the quarantine system. So I am proposing that at this time, government has already fumigated the private senior high schools, and we are sitting with a redundant of 350, let's say, separate private schools that are also found within the municipalities and, let's say, regions where the system is very congested. So why can't we purge with these schools, have a dialogue with these proprietors and, let's say, owners of these schools, so that their facilities can also support the facilities that the government are facing? But some of the schools are having nice, as you have already accepted, some of the schools are having nice facilities that can be used as, let's say, a patching center or, let's say, a temporary center for these students who wants to have accommodation and all these things. And that one will also ease the pressure of the government, because as of now, government cannot say that it's going to use 2 weeks or 3 months to set up an infrastructure. It cannot be possible. So the best option to do this is to look for the existing precious, let's say, facilities that are available and see the best way we can enter into any, let's say, public and private partnership agreement with these facility owners.
All right, thank you. Let me come now to Professor Piaget. Now, Prof, let me ask you this. Can students and teachers at the university afford a truncated semester? What would the impact if you decide to truncate the semester based on this?
It will be very difficult because we have agreed on 13 weeks of lectures, and they are packed with particular courses that will ensure that you have completed a certain cycle of teaching, and therefore you qualify to be given a certificate to indicate that you have completed this program. So if you truncate it, the question is, how are you going to make up for the topics that were not taught? So that is where the problem lies. So we have to find alternative means to be able to make up for this. And that would, I think for universities, the online platform offers a means to make up for this situation, yes.
But we've also seen resistance from students to some of these online exams, not necessarily from your school, but I'm sure you are aware of some of the statements that have come from some SRCs who are saying they are not very comfortable with some of the suggestions put forth by their universities on how to assess them at the end of the year, if that is that's a good way to put it.
I think we live in a situation where the normal is no more the normal. We are living in a new normal. So certainly things have changed, and we have to adapt to that change. And so the students cannot rely on going back to the old way of doing things. But the point they have here is that there seems to have been a top-down approach, where the students have not been given the opportunity to sit down with the lecturers or the university to do tete-a-tete and agree that this is the way to go. I think if that is done, there will be a way that a new path that we can chart to move the process forward. Because certainly the fact is that we cannot go back to where we were before COVID-19 struck. But we have to work together to be able to find a joint solution to this.
All right then. And Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa, is also on the line. Franklin, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to my fellow panel members and viewers and listeners.
Okay, Franklin, I'll come to you in just a second. Let me just finish with Professor Piaget Chia. In fact, let me just begin the next phase of my questioning with you. There are those who have said that for this also to happen, testing and mandatory testing, regular mandatory testing, has to be a key part of the process. Is that something lecturers feel is necessary if you want to let students back in, irrespective of the facing, the spacing, whatever? You must be able to test us, and not at your cost, but at the school's cost or the state's cost.
I personally agree with that position, and I've been canvassing for that position. There should be regular testing of students, and as frequently as possible, so that we'll be able to identify who may have it. Some may be asymptomatic, and so when we're able to identify them, then we can take the next step. Treat them, isolate them, quarantine them, or whatever, and then do the tracing as well. So that way, to help us to be able to make sure that the whole system is sanitized, and people who may have it will get the treatment they need. And to a very large extent, if the testing goes on, at a certain point we can say that, oh, I think everybody now has been tested. Those who have it have been isolated, and therefore things can return to as normal as possible as we can. Yeah, so the testing is very important.
All right, then, thank you. Let me go to Kofi before I come back to you, Franklin. Franklin, just hold on for me. Kofi, for a lot of stakeholders involved, the testing is the crux of the matter. Yes, infrastructure and all those, but there are cynics who will also say that, well, the testing is expensive. And perhaps that is what seems to be pulling the government back a bit, because they are saying, if you look at the numbers, can they afford to test all these people at such regular intervals just so that parents can sleep easy when they are sending their kids to school?
Yeah, so far, in all the scenarios we've been considering and proposing and discussing, the testing is the most difficult, not impossible one. Difficult in the sense that we are looking at over 8 million students, and I can imagine what it means to do 8 million tests. If you add the about 500,000 teachers, both at the pre-tertiary and tertiary level, teachers and lecturers, then it becomes quite of an uphill task. I know in Namibia, for instance, the teacher unions have made it a prerequisite that until all teachers are tested, they will not return to school. They've made two demands: that mandatory testing of teachers, not students, and then also the provision of PPEs to all students by the state.
I think we heard Zimbabwe to say so yesterday. Teachers in Zimbabwe say if they don't get mandatory testing, they're not going back.
Exactly. So for me, that is the most challenging of all the proposals. In terms of its how realistic it is, because the number is huge, and we need to have a conversation around that. The scientists will tell us how they can be innovative, in using fewer test kits to do this test. But at the end of the day, if you spend so much to test a child and the child is in a day school, the child will go home and come to school the next day again. And so, it's quite a tricky issue.
Yeah, but it seems to be the big one, Kofi. Whether we like it or not, for parents, they would want their children to be tested regularly. And for all the other places that you've mentioned, the advanced countries, this particular factor is being satisfied. Teachers are being tested, students are being tested regularly. It is the only way parents are allowing their kids to go back to school.
I'm not aware of students being tested regularly in the about 30 countries that have opened. I'm not aware of students being tested regularly, but I'm aware of teachers being tested. Yes. So the discussion is on teachers, because that is a bit reasonable and within the reach of any average country. So I think that the priority should be testing of all teachers and education workers, people who work within the school environment, instead of the children. If we demand so much, we may end up not opening the schools at all.
But we are talking about lives here. Should that be compromised on?
Yeah, we are talking about life within the context of what is practicable. We are talking about lives within the context of what is practicable. Some people don't even believe that government can provide common N95 masks for children, when we know that the child cannot wear the mask that you are wearing for more than 6 hours. It's too hot in the classroom. Our classrooms are poorly ventilated, and so the only ventilated mask we have around is the N95, which is not as cheap as this ones, And so even proposals that government should provide N95 for children because of the 4 hours that they may have to sit in class without going for break, and then the 1 hour or 2 hours to and fro school, 6 hours, you have to wear it whether they're in the bus going or coming to school. And the fact that the child shouldn't remove it under the pretext of heat. In that case, you get a ventilated one, which is N95. Even that, people think that it's too expensive. And so, well, it's not bad to have the discussion, but I think realistically, we should be looking at doing that for about 200. I don't want to refer myself to the public schools, but all public and private school teachers, including the universities, will have to go through that mandatory testing.
Okay.
That can be about 500 teachers can be managed, reasonably.
All right. Let me go to Franklin now and take his thoughts before I end on this side with Mr. Jetua, and then we will go to the policy matters regarding the Public Universities Bill and then the pre-tertiary universities, the pre-tertiary bill as well. Franklin, what have you made of the suggestions to reopen schools? And you can start from the testing matter. For a lot of stakeholders, that seems to be key. Testing infrastructure.
Well, good morning once again. I think these are very interesting conversations. Dovetails into the larger conversation about living with the virus. The challenge with living with the virus when it comes to students, and in this case, I think the experts have spoken at length on the types of students, or so the categories of students we are dealing with. I would be willing to live with a situation where let's say from grades 8 onwards or grade 7 onwards up to grade 12 are faced, there's some sort of reopening which takes into consideration this phased approach. How that is done would have to be respected across board. I understand the categorization of respect for protocols within the schools that we have. We have the private and the public schools. Within the public sector, you would expect that these would also have to be respected. The private schools believe they can do this well. Fact of the matter is that I would also be interested in having a very liberal approach. If parents decide that, look, I'm not comfortable about the structures that are put in place, their rights should be respected, and some form of accommodation may have to be made for them one way or the other. Because truth be told, we are not in a situation where our basis for testing is so rigorous, if indeed intensified, that we can, even in a phased approach, everybody else will be comfortable. I think people's rights and child rights would also come into play here. So that's why I'll leave it there. That's why I'll leave this matter about the reopening and the phased approach and the test. These are challenging times, I understand, but I think we should also be a bit cautious how we go about all of this. The advanced countries can afford to do, and if you see the visuals of how they are doing this, it's quite interesting. I wonder though that if our oversized classes, I wonder how these things will be done effectively. And of course, the other issues around phytosanitary conditions, which also have to be in place properly. Because I think Mr. Saria was saying that those who are gender vulnerable must be catered for. There's just too many factors involved that, unfortunately, because our school systems have not been managed properly, it's a bit discomforting to hear that, allow us to reopen, we can manage it. But I'm all for a very phased approach, which takes into consideration the slightly aged groups. So from DSS 1 thereabout, and even then, if a class is about 60, I think the phased approach really must be looking at 10 to 15 per class at a time.
All right, then. Thank you, Frank. Let me take some messages and then we take a break. When we return from that break, I will begin the conversation on the Public Universities Bill. I will start that from Professor P.J. Kofi will make input into that as well, and then we will go into the pre-tertiary one as well. Certain demands have been listened to by the Ministry of Education. We hear that the decentralization part, and Kofi has been dealing with this quite heavily, so we will spend quite some time on that. But messages that have come in, you can also send yours 0549 986 996. Says that good morning to you. Fantastic submission by your panelists. It's not easy to roll out accelerated learning methods as suggested by Kofi, because a good teacher must take the learning pace of the student into consideration. After all, the focus ought to be on the student understanding the concepts rather than the teacher moving at a fast or accelerated pace. John from Kokomlemle. That's a good one, John. Good morning, Godfred. Help me understand this. How many West African countries come together to make all right WASI? Kofi can help you with that. Based on that, Godfred, are these countries also not hit by COVID-19? Why can't they come together and deliberate and, if necessary, put a hold on the examination? So we call this done once and for all. I don't think we must prioritize education over life. Thomas, citizen from Amasaman. Well, Thomas, it was the WASI group that suspended the exams that was going to be held. So they certainly are in play. Also, Elvis from Sakumono says, did you guys say we can leave procurement to the government, which is struggling to provide PPEs to hospitals to keep up with COVID? We are not ready to go back to school until it's accepted that we are living with COVID-19. Also, this one says, good morning, may I know what the plans we are taking towards the opening of schools, especially final year ones? We are planning within our own context as a country, or we are involving other countries? Okay, so that is what he wants to know. Mauko from La Paz says, what can be done for basic schools which are already running shifts due to overcrowding? Should they also go back to school? Well, it looks like they might have to take more shifts, if I hear Kofi and Mr. Jitua correctly. Edmond Wesley Sam from Ashaman says the restrictions must be extended because even we, the matured ones, are not obeying social distancing. Some of our children are very recalcitrant, especially the primary students. Nobody should push the government to do something wrong. We should think about our brothers. So keep sending the messages. We'll take a quick break. The Big Issue, be right back.
And people are opening doors for me, or driving for me, or giving me a huge respect. Not for me, for Shani Cooper. Not to Shani Cooper is the respect. The respect is for the state of Israel.
And one day I was in Quebec, vacations with my cousin, and someone calls me from Brazil saying, do you want to be ambassador in Ghana? I said, yes.
Good morning once again, and you're watching The Big Issue, and for those of us watching on television, we are discussing the education situation regarding COVID, discussing how we can go back to school, and also discussing policy on the way forward for our education. It's very important right now where our educational sector is. There are two important laws before Parliament that will determine the future of education at the tertiary level and education at the pre-tertiary level, and concerns have been raised about both, but it also looks like consensus building is ongoing, at least at the pre-tertiary level side. At the public university side, early stages yet, but UTAG seem to have concerns, and Professor P.J. Tia is a member of UTAG, as well as I said earlier on. And UTAG earlier in the week, Prof, issued a statement regarding the bill, expressing its concerns and also putting forth some suggestions. For those who are not aware, what are the problems with the public university bill as it is? We thought the government was trying to just put things together and make it more efficient. Why are you troubled by it?
Well, we are troubled by the bill because, first of all, we have to look at the memorandum for the bill. The basis for coming up with the bill, we think is problematic. It's talking about the fact that there is diversity in the way the different universities are structured because each one has its own act regulating it. And secondly, the Auditor General has come up with reports about maladministration and grave issues concerning financial management or mismanagement within the universities. And so this new bill is supposed to deal with such matters to ensure that there's transparency and accountability, and that the government will be able to regulate matters, because it thinks that the government is the funder of the universities and therefore it should have a higher stake in how the university is run. But our contention is that these issues that the government is raising are unheard of, or they are not real.
How so?
And in the sense that comparatively, the university as it is one of the most stable and well-organized governance structures among many of the public institutions we have in the country. And we have been able to manage our affairs in a manner that is also in consonance with the traditions of the university, and especially in the context of academic freedom. And so on that basis, we think that the law as it is will not serve its purpose. It is unnecessary, and it will even create more problems if it is allowed to come into force.
Or for those who, some will say, you just don't want to be accountable. You just want to be allowed to do your own things as usual.
That is not the case at all. The university believes in accountability. If you're talking about academic freedom, it doesn't go with just doing things your own way. Academic freedom is supposed to ensure that you have the free space to do scientific inquiry, to produce knowledge, to disseminate knowledge, to engage in teaching and research, but it's subject to professional ethics, it's subject to accountability. But at the same time, there should be the space where the university is not threatened by the state, and the state is able to respect the space that the university is supposed to have. The rights of academics should also be respected, and even the rights of students, so that that congenial atmosphere will exist for academic work to take place unhindered.
Your general concerns, let's pick a few. The first one says, we observe that out of the total membership of 13 council members, only 5 are from the university. This tells everything in favor of the government of the day. In any case, governance of the public universities is different from the usual corporate governance as we know it. Explain this for me. What is if government wants to have more people, wants to have more of a say in a university that it funds, what is the problem with it?
Again, we come back to the issue of academic freedom. First of all, let's make the point clear that for the first time in our constitutional history, the Constitution recognizes academic freedom specifically in the Constitution. And academic freedom hinges on 4 main elements: institutional autonomy, self-governance, individual rights and freedoms for academics and students, and the issue of tenure/promotion. The composition of the University Council is at the heart of university governance, and that is dealing with self-governance and institutional autonomy as well. If you have a situation where the majority of the appointees are government appointees, first of all, you are taking us back to the 1960s when Nkrumah was in power, and he himself was the chancellor, and he appointed the chairman of council, and he handpicked the members of the council. That is not the way a university is supposed to be run. And so if you look at the bill as it stands, quorum can be formed by 7 people. And so if government has a representative of 8 and even 9, then it can sit somewhere and organize a meeting and make decisions for the university. And that is not how we think the university is supposed to be run. Self-governance means that majority of the university personnel should be on the council. A number of them have also been taken out. We're talking about alumni, which plays a key role in the running of the university, industry players that fund some research activities and provide avenues for internships and so on. These are all missing. Members of academic board, members of convocation, they are all not there. And so that is why we think that that arrangement is not going to work for the university. Because at the end of the day, even when we are talking about research grants and so on, the procedure that it has to go through, even if you want to buy chairs and tables to fill a lecture room, according to the bill as it is, we have to go through the Minister of Education, and that just will not work. It will be impracticable, and it will create so many obstacles and bureaucracies that we think will slow down the proper functioning of the university.
You also raise issues about the centralized application processing procedure, which according to UTAG is likely to infringe on the institutional autonomy of the university, as it will remove control of determining who is best qualified for a program of the institution to a different body which may not know or understand this criterion.
Yes, one of the institutional autonomy elements of the university is the ability to admit who to teach and what to teach. And so if you have a situation where government is saying that we are going to have a stake in the kind of people you admit, then it is infringing on the university's autonomy to determine who to teach. And then it's also going to turn upside down the years of effort made into determining criteria for appointing, for admitting students, including giving room for affirmative action for some women who may not meet the cut and so on. So certainly it is going to control affairs of how the university admissions go. And for example, if you look at the decision why the university is now on a 4-year run instead of 3 years, it was because the kind of students that were coming from when there was a conversion at the secondary school level, from the usual secondary school we know to the senior high school system, the truncation of the years meant that the university has to reorganize and say that you have to go 4 years because the students didn't go through enough training to be at the university. So the university had to decide on that, and it has worked well for us. But if, as things stand now, students are being brought into the system and they are being controlled by the government, we are going to have a situation where there's also going to be massification, huge numbers in the classrooms. Meanwhile, the infrastructure is not there, lecturers are not adequate, and it's going to create problems for us. So certainly that admission process is also an infringement on academic freedom.
Your UTAG sounds really suspicious, or should I say wary, of government.
We are, because first of all, what the government is doing is not based on law. It violates the Constitution clearly. And it is clear on the face of it that the chancellor is not supposed to be, the president cannot be a chancellor of the university. But if you go through the back door and say that the university council should appoint 3 people and then the president will make the final decision, and the university council itself is populated by government appointees, and the chairperson of the university council is also appointed by the president. In other words, it's the president who has determined who the chancellor is. And even when you make the 3 nominations, the president will make the final decision. Then we are violating Article 68, 1 of the 2 of the Constitution, which says the president cannot be a chancellor of a university. We also have a situation where even the vice chancellor could end up being a puppet for the government, because at the end of the day, even though it's the council that will appoint the vice chancellor, the majority of the government appointees are on the council. So it is at the end of the day, they will control and determine who the president, the chancellor, or the vice chancellor of the university should be. So we think that government is not coming clear on why it wants to come up with this law, because if you look at all the justification it's trying to put up, it doesn't exist in reality on the ground in the universities.
And we see also you've made some recommendations or suggestions with regards to rephrasing parts of this. What are some of the key points regarding that for you?
Well, first of all, the position of UTAG is that the bill should not be passed at all.
Oh.
Yes, and if that is not done, then the best compromise we reach is that let us fundamentally revise some of the provisions of the bill. And one of the key issues we have with the bill is the composition of the governing council, the issue of the chancellor, and then the admission process, the fact that the Minister of Education can, by way of directives, make laws for the university. The fact that it's calling for a harmonized statutes. When the university, each one is unique, and competition is what sets a university apart from the other. So if you want to harmonize and bring uniformity to the whole system as it stands. It's going to kill that innovative element that should run through the universities.
Is that something that is done globally, this harmonized charter system that is being suggested? Have you seen evidence of it anywhere else?
I'm not sure I know of anywhere else. There could be some examples, but I don't know of that. But of course, I know that in some countries they have a harmonized act. But the act deals with certain peculiar issues. For example, the issue of promotion. Because if you're looking at some universities, they have different promotion criteria. So the act deals with that in some countries. It also deals with how to access research grants. As it is in Ghana, if you compare the situation in Ghana, we have a situation where every lecturer is supposed to access a certain amount of money every year for research. But in some countries, it is based on the research output over the previous year. That will determine what we get for the next academic year. So the harmonized acts in certain countries deal with such matters. And UTAG is saying that we will not be opposed to such an arrangement. But apart from that, the university, there are certain laws which we think that as they stand, they should be maintained in the universities in order to bring that diversity and the element of competition that should go into the running of each university in the country.
All right, then. Thank you, Professor Appiah-Jetah. Let me get on my virtual panel and talk to Kofi Asare. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Kofi. Yeah.
Yes, Kofi, I'm sure you might want to make a bit of input into what Professor Appiah-Jetah said, and then you can also touch on the announcement we received from the Ministry of Education this week on removing the decentralization element from the pre-tertiary bill, which was a key sticking point for the stakeholders, especially at the teaching side.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Doc.
Professor Chia.
Most of the Professor Chia, yeah, on most of the issues that he raised. And I only disagree with him on the issue of the common admission platform, that is centralized admission processing service, the CAPS. I think that as we run our universities, the universities are a living organism, just like society, and so we grow and we evolve as society evolves. And so the age-old practice of students having to purchase 4 or 5 public university forms just to get assurance of an admission is inequitable. It is actually exploitative, and it shouldn't be an action that should be continued or encouraged. I know the universities are comfortable with it because they use it as a means to raise internally generated funds, but to the extent that it excludes people, especially people on grounds of socioeconomic factors, we shouldn't encourage that. If we have an innovative solution which will ensure that I'll buy just one form and then it will qualify me for consideration for placement in any of the public universities, in this case about 20 public universities in the schedule of the act, of the bill, then it helps some of us who have no money to buy many forms, to enhance our chances of getting admission to university. That, having said that, you see, I am looking at the bill from the purely sociological perspective. Laws are developed, obviously, to facilitate the process of development. Now, if you look at the cabinet memo underpinning this law, the memo normally will spell out the intention of the executive in thinking through such a law. The memo explicitly mentions that the bill is being necessitated by impropriety in the universities, lack of accountability, and transparency in the utilization of public funds. And it even cites Auditor General's reports, among others. This is the rationale or the thinking of the executive in tabling this proposed law or this bill, which is fantastic. If an institution has, accountability deficits, it is the responsibility of the ministry or the executive which provides funding to run it to ensure that accountability is restored or it's actually achieved in that institution. However, what we find problematic is the hypothesis that when there are accountability deficits or gaps in an institution, the solution is not law enforcement, but rather the promulgation of new laws. If we haven't been able to enforce the criminal code and all other legislations, the Public Financial Management Act and all other legislations aimed at ensuring that there is accountability and there is prudence in the management of public funds in the universities, what is the assurance that if these new laws are brought in, these ones will be implemented? That is not there. Secondly, the assumption again that by increasing the number of the executives appointee or the president's appointees on the university council or in the governance of the university, accountability would have been achieved. It's very, very, very difficult to appreciate, because the approach the ministry and for the matter government is adapting to reduce the accountability deficits in the university is by increasing the number of government appointees on the university's council from 28% to 64%. So if your approach in Legon, for instance, 6 out of 21 of the university council come from government, but you are proposing that your approach to instilling more accountability is that you are going to increase it to 9 out of 14. But our engagement and our experience in this country with the public sector provides an evidence that speaks to the contrary. How the evidence on the ground suggests to the opposite, that boards, government boards, or boards of state-owned enterprises or public corporations, which are dominated by politicians or the executives, have actually failed the accountability test. They are likely to fail because politicians are padded on such boards. And so I struggle to situate the hypothesis behind the bill within the context of our experience in Ghana in respect to boards of public agencies.
All right, Kofi, quickly, you have to move on to the pre-tertiary part and the concession from the ministry for me this week. I have only 10 minutes left on this matter, so.
Yeah, I was only wrapping up on this, that so in terms of the ideological framework, in terms of the strategic direction of the law, it is totally misplaced, because the evidence in Ghana and our experience does not suggest in any way or does not point to the direction that when government appointees are more or form the majority on public boards, it leads to an efficient running of those boards. That is not correct. And that is why we think that the attempt by the executive to annex and seize control of the universities through their governing councils, and also legislating strict policies that pin the universities to virtually become the department of the Ministry of Education, is not a way to go in ensuring accountability and transparency. Let us enforce the existing laws when the university is found to engage in any act of financial propriety. The Auditor General is there, the Attorney General is there. Let's enforce the laws than promulgate new laws, which are also not likely to be enforced anyway.
All right. I wanted your input on the Ministry of Education saying that the decentralization component of the pre-tertiary bill had been removed.
Yeah. So we received a letter from the minister, and then the letter simply said that some sections of the bill have been expunged to allow for the bill to go through Parliament, to sail through Parliament. Apparently, teacher unions have the biggest issue with the bill because they believe that it reduces their strength by devolving them into another creature under the district assembly, under the local government service, and so they will lose their identity. And so the minister, in a bid to meet them halfway, brought the letter that from sections 29 to section 37, the ministry has decided to expunge these sections from the bill. But if you look at the bill, these sections that the minister is expunging are actually sections that deal with the management of secondary education. And just one aspect of the decentralized education framework, which is the responsibility of managing education. But it still maintains the provision that there shall be a Department of Education in the district whose head shall be appointed by the local government service, who shall operate within the local government system, and shall be responsible for the management of education in the district. It is still intact. The decentralization bit of this bill is the bill because Act 778 was passed by President Kufuor on his last day in office to devolve education management to the district. Unfortunately, there were incongruity. There was some incongruity between implementing the 778 and the then existing Act 506, which is the Genius Act. Mm-hmm. So because of the incongruity or inconsistency in the implementation of 778, we had to either amend 778 to make it compatible with 506 or develop a new legislation so that it will expressly repeal 506 and 778. And that is where we are coming for with this tertiary education bill, to find a common ground and then pave way for the smooth implementation of the decentralized education framework, which was envisaged in the Act 778. And so the difference between Act 506, which is the Genius Act, which has been there for about 20 years or so, 25 years, and Act 778, and this bill is the decentralization bit. So if you took out the decentralized education framework from this bill, then this bill is just like Genius Act. You might as well, yes, So, but if you go through the bill, the decentralization bit is still there. It is only the aspect dealing with the excessive powers that the teacher unions and other agencies thought were still granted executive in terms of the appointment of the regional education directorates, the management of regional education, secondary school management, board management, and issues. Those are the issues in the sections that have been expunged. But the sections relating to the decentralization, section 39, the head of the local government service, in consultation with the Ministry of Education and Education Service, shall appoint the head of staff of the district education section. The head of local government service will be responsible for promotion, transfer, discipline, dismissal of staff of the district education section. So the aspect of human integration, in devolution, we have the physical integration, we have the manpower absorption. The aspect of manpower absorption is clearly devolved to the local government service. It hasn't been changed, but that is under section 39. The expunged sections does not include 39. And so if you go down, all the HR integration issues in this devolution agenda still remains intact.
Okay.
And so I don't think that the decentralization, which we call devolution more or less, the devolution agenda of the tertiary education bill has been thrown away, except that issues relating to executive dominance in the management of secondary education have been expunged, among others. And I think it still remains a good bill. I urge the teacher unions to at a point agree with government on the need for us to devolve education to the district, because it is difficult for us to ensure quality management supervision of education if we continue running this centralized system where the person in Accra has responsibility, but the person in Tintimshe or Chifupraso has only responsibility without authority. So your authority and responsibility is in Accra, but then the person who directly manages education, who should be held responsible for learning outcomes, only has responsibility but has no authority. There must be a corresponding dose of responsibility and authority shifted from the center to the periphery, and this must include procurement, decision making. It must include HR management, and must also include administrative decision making.
Right.
Let me finally conclude that apart from the deletion that the minister has made, we made a point that procurement, the transfer of procurement wasn't explicitly mentioned in the bill. we have to insist and ensure that it is mentioned explicitly that procurement has also been shipped to the district, because if we ship HR management and we ship administrative decision making and we fail to ship procurement, we will still be running a very, very, very bureaucratic system, which will affect the quality of management of education and also the quality of learning of learning outcomes.
All right. Thank you very much, Kofi Asare, who is from the Africa Education Watch. Professor Piagetto, I'll give you the final words on this, and then I will move on to the next phase of my conversation.
Thank you very much. I think the point we want to make is that, first of all, the law as it stands, the bill as it stands, violates certain provisions of the Constitution. And we are emphasizing that if we want to go with this bill, then it means we are, in a way, condoning illegality. Secondly, we feel that the law is unnecessary because the structures are already there in place to be able to ensure that there is orderliness. The university is being projected as being a corrupt institution, but that is not the case at all. If you compare with other institutions, as my friend Kofi Asare said, we are in a much better situation. And the government doesn't seem to understand how some of the university procedures and systems work. The council, for example, is not a council of auditors, if you can put it that way. There are certain auditing structures in place which have been highly commended by University of Ghana, for example, if I can speak for my institution, that the audit system in place is very effective and is able to detect any kind of mispropriety and so on. So I think that is where we have to look at. And finally, we're also making the point that if the law is passed in its present form, it will create more problems than it can resolve. Noguchi, for example, was able to win some grant to help with the COVID-19 fight.
Certainly.
Because of the existing procedures. Otherwise, it would have gone through some convoluted bureaucratic procedures and it may have lost the grant. So what we are asking for is that the law is unnecessary. It shouldn't come into place. If it has to, then there's the need for major revisions to ensure that it conforms with the law and the traditions of the university.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Piagetto, lecturer at the University of Ghana School of Law, and also a member of UTAG. This is where we'll end the conversation on education. A big thank you to Kofi Asare from the Africa Education Watch. Angel Carbonu sends his apologies. He's the president of NAGRAT. Angel, we hope you are okay wherever you are. Mr. Enoch Jetua is the president of the Ghana National Council of Private Schools. He also joined us on the line. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we will go to the matter of politics and the controversial one of compiling a new voters register and the exclusion of a voter ID card. The Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Peter Boamo Tukuno, will join us, as will the Member of Parliament for Sekondi, lawyer Andrew Ejapa Mesa, also comes in studio. Franklin Kujo stays with us after the break.
Extra data, extra minutes, and extra unlimited calls. Not just that, even our extra data doesn't expire. You fill up, simply dial *111# to bundle now.
Airtel Tigo. Life is simple.
And people are opening doors for me, or driving for me, or giving me a huge respect. Not for me, for Shani Cooper. Not to Shani Cooper is the respect. The respect is for the state of Israel.
One day I was in Quebec, vacations with my cousin, and someone calls me from Brazil saying, "Do you want to be ambassador in Ghana?" I said, "Yes, I do."
City TV is live. On DSTV, go to channel 363. On GoTV, access City TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and StarTimes box. City TV, it's your world.
So you're welcome back to the big issue, and we are changing gears now, moving into politics, and it's been a contentious week. The National Democratic Congress organizing another press conference to reiterate its resistance to the EC's call to compile a new voters register, excluding the voter ID card that has been in play. The EC has also continued to defend this stance and is expected to make an appearance in Parliament soon to explain the procedures going forward. There are a couple of things happening in Parliament as well. The Honorable Mahama Ayariga has initiated some processes. Honorable Japamesa has been commenting on it all week on the matter. We'll try and get some more insight on that as well. But you can also keep your messages coming through as usual. You can send them 0550-585-832. You can see the numbers on your screen easily. For those of you on Twitter, City973, you can send via the hashtag the big issue, or to me, Godfrey Akutubuafu at East Postman on Twitter, the same hashtag. So let me start with Peter Boamo Tukuno, who's the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. Peter, what is it about this that you don't want to, and your party does not want to understand? You've spoken about it. It has been explained to you several times by the EC. The NPP has also come out to say, look, this is what is going to happen. Your party, are you simply being hard-eared on this matter?
Godfred,
is there a battle to fight here?
Thank you, Godfred, for having me. And this matter is not a matter that is cured with explanations, especially when the explanations are half-hearted and do not find foundation in some of the reasons why, the people of this country, including CSO, some political parties, moral society, religious societies, are worried about the conduct of the Electoral Commission, especially when it comes to the compilation of the new voter register ahead of the general elections. Indeed, this matter can be put into three folds, and I would want to try and do the discussion along these lines. First of all, whether or not there is a need for a new voter register. Then, second, why the exclusion of the voter ID card in the current amendments that is in Parliament. Then, what constitutes what we call the grand criminal collusion between government and the Electoral Commission to rig the 2020 election?
Criminal collusion?
Yes, it's a criminal collusion between the government and the Electoral Commission to rig the election. First of all, the issue about the new voter register. The reasons have been amplified enough. And we have said, for example, that the current register that we have, it was prepared with the thinking that we were preparing a permanent register, a register that will stand the test of time. And so you realize that the key features of the register is in a manner that you will not need to be replacing, because if you capture people's biometrics onto a system, it is forever. Nobody can vote in their name. And essentially what new voter registers were done, those that were done in the past, were supposed to cure. The problems they were supposed to cure was the fact that people could vote in people's names. People could go to the polling station and they will vote in people's names. This current register that we have has cured all that problem. You cannot vote in anybody's name. The EC argued about the system, and they said the system is problematic. The VMS transmission, sometimes when the weather goes bad, they are not able to transmit. But the fact of the matter is that it has nothing to do with the register. and the data that is available. Now, they have said, for example, that the BVRs are obsolete. The BVRs are equipments that is used during registration time. So if they are obsolete, all you need to do is to procure new BVRs and register the people. What the Electoral Commission is suggesting is that we throw the entire data that we have captured, including all the equipments that we have bought, away, and go and spend over 833 million Ghana cedis to procure new ones. And we have said that no, this is a wasteful expenditure. First of all, even the thought of compiling a new voter register is needless.
According to your party?
Yes, I mean, according to the facts available. Now, we have gotten to the point where we have realized that perhaps the thought of compiling a new voter register may not be born out of the reasons that the Electoral Commission are giving, but perhaps because the New Patriotic Party, over the period after they led us into this biometric voter register, felt that perhaps they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve with the register, so they wanted a new voter register. I'm sure you have followed the discussion even before the 2016 elections, how they took us to the Justice VCRAC committee for all the discussions to be held. And the final conclusion by the committee that we do not need a new voter register. The current voter register is very credible, and that we should put systems in place that will make the continuous registration of new voters onto the roll, more credible. Now you have the case where President Akufo-Addo wins election, and quickly one of the first things his government does was to remove the EC and replace the EC with Jane Mensah. The interesting thing about that replacement, which finds its root in what we are discussing right now, is that Jane Mensah, even before her appointment, has held position that is consistent with what we are saying now. Jane Mensah led a team to prepare this document, and I'm sure you have seen this document. It was done in 2014, proposals for electoral reforms. It was done by the IEA. It involved political parties, the MPP, NDC, and other political parties on the Ghana Political Parties program of the IEA. And most of the recommendations of this document was to work hard to maintain the current register as a permanent register and improve the continuous registration process. Based on this document, the Electoral Commission at IPAC thought that it was important to be inspired by some of the recommendations in this document. So an electoral reforms committee was formed after the VCRAC based on this document.
It says so in this document that it is based on that
based
document.
on this document and recommendations from the VCRAC committee, this electoral reforms committee was formed. And even some of the rulings that came out from the 2013 court case. So this reform committee, which had representation from the MPP, Kwabena Japan represented the MPP, you have Johnson Asedu Nketia representing the NDC, Kwabena Bonfe, the CPP, IEA itself was on this reform committee. This reform committee recommended that we keep the register as a permanent register, improve the procedures of running expanding the register as prescribed under Article 45 of the Constitution. And so this position is very consistent with what we are holding today. And Jane Mensah played very critical role in both of them.
But let's not say this is not a Jane Mensah manifesto.
No, it's not. It's not. This one, perhaps you may want to consider it as a Jane Mensah manifesto. But this one,
I'm saying that was Jane Mensah, the private citizen running
exactly.
IEA. This is Jane Mensah, the EC.
Godfred, I agree with you perfectly, and that is where I'm drawing my point. You understand? So you have Jane Mensah become the Electoral Commissioner. Then the first thing that she does, the most important thing that she does, is to go against her long-standing views of what the register is about. And it becomes very, very curious. But your curiosity will be cured by the attempt by the Electoral Commission to also the President Akufo-Addo government to play the citizenship politics. Now, the citizenship politics, started when they were in opposition. And all the arguments are that, there are a lot of foreigners on the register, some 72,000 Togolese and all that, which they were not able to prove. But they did something significant in 2018. They decided to amend the National Identification Act. And that amendment, they excluded the voter ID card as an identifying document, a primary identification document, for one to go and register as a Ghanaian. We thought that was very curious. But there again, the consistency was there because they have maintained that some people are not Ghanaians. Now, we battled this thing to a point that we in the NDC said that we will not even participate in the registration. It happened in Parliament, members of Parliament boycotted. Subsequently, when the exercise started...
But hold on for me, before you get there, did you battle the exclusion of the voter ID card in Parliament?
Oh, yes. Yes, it was battled. Perhaps maybe you may be looking at it in two folds. When the bill went to Parliament and the debate on it and all that. Then when actually the registration started and they realized that, no, this is what is going to happen. People who are having voter ID card, will be excluded. And you saw that they boycotted sessions in discussing the registration procedure. When they started the registration in Parliament, they boycotted. You understand? So our disquiet was expressed very loudly. But you see the link clearly that the government, through the NIA, or perhaps the president, who directly, is responsible for the National Identification Authority, the NIA is under the office of the president, has taken that steps with the hope that having G Mensa being in support of the thought of replacing the register, that document that they are preparing, excluding the voter ID card, would be a foundational document that will feed into the grand agenda of excluding voter ID cards from the registration. We didn't see it coming because, at that point it was only suspicion. I recall 2019 at IPAC. We raised the question and asked Jimensa, that Jimensa, you are the head of the institution that issued the voter ID card. Are you aware that the NIA is conducting registration and the bill they have sent to Parliament for that registration, they have excluded the voter ID card? As the chairperson of the EC, an institution responsible for issuing the ID card, don't you have anything to say? Because you can vouch for the credibility of that document. The minister said no. She doesn't have anything to say. It's the NIA. What the NIA does is different from what they do. Then we asked her, there's a school of thought that this exclusion is towards disenfranchising people, in that the Ghana card subsequently will be used for registration exercise. Then Jimensa said no, it is not possible because they have a different template, they have a different system, they are looking at a different thing.
This is on record?
Yeah, this is on record. Fast forward. On January 30th, when we had the meeting with the Committee of Eminent Advisors and the political parties and CSOs, it was emphasized in their presentation that they are going to use their voter ID card, which they trust, which they think is credible. But because of the technical challenges, they are not going to use all the information on the voter system. But through the ID card, you go there and they extract your biodata. And I'm sure the director, their consultant also said it on CTFM. They are going to extract some part of the biodata. Then they take the picture and do the facial, scanner. Fine. We still had problem with the idea of compiling the voter register. So, we were just insisting that don't do it at all. Don't go and take the pictures and use the voter ID card. Then, Godfred, all of a sudden, COVID-19 came in. Everybody was running for cover. Then, under the cover of darkness, the Electoral Commission surreptitiously, with obvious, connivance with the MPP, sent a bill to Parliament without discussion at IPAC. And from what we heard, the bill did not even go through the subsidiary legislation committee. It went straight to the majority leader.
But what we also told is you simply did not pay attention at IPAC.
No, I'm going to address that. I'm going to address that very quickly.
Then do so now.
Otherwise you will derail me.
Okay. No worries.
So the majority leader, who some few months ago in December stood on a platform in Trade Fair to actually mention that if they compile a new voter register, there is no way the NDC will win election. To wit, without a new voter register, they cannot win an election. Then you have the Electoral Commission circumventing all the systems in connivance with him, sending a bill to Parliament consistent with the position of the President and the government to exclude voter ID card, to become the basis for one to register as a voter in this country. you would be a very surprising human being if you cannot decipher the grand collusion between these two groups to disenfranchise people in this region, especially considering the fact that the NIA card itself that they are using as the main basis is an incomplete process and has only 7 million people carrying the card. Now, let's deal with the amendment of the CI and the falsehood, the palpable falsehood, the barefaced lie that is being peddled by the MPP. The bill was sent to Parliament on 17th March, Tuesday, and the Parmesa will attest to that. In fact, CTFM published it. The first time we, the political parties, heard about that bill was in the news, published by CTFM and the other news webs, that a bill has been sent to Parliament and the voter ID card had been excluded. The meeting that they are referring to happened on 20. Was written on the 19th of March, 3 or 4 clear days after the filing of the amendments in Parliament. Now, let's look at the claim that it was discussed. I can't imagine that anybody would suggest that an amendment will be filed in Parliament, then 8 clear days after, consultations will be done. It doesn't make sense. It is completely unintelligent for anybody to suggest that. Now, let's look at what happened on that day.
You have 8 minutes.
Yes, the invitation for that meeting stated clearly the agenda and the purpose for the meeting. The agenda was update on new voter register and AOB. When we received the letter, we realized that the Electoral Commission was thinking of dividing IPAC into 2. So we have morning session and afternoon session, double track IPAC. Then we said, no, you cannot, as a committee, which is an entity, which is a body, divide itself into 2 and discuss the same issues and expect to take decision on them. It doesn't happen anywhere. It's like CTFM management saying that you want to have a meeting, but because of the situation, the public health protocols, you want to divide yourself into 2. You are going to take a decision on the same matter. It is most ridiculous. That cannot happen. If you want to do the meeting by any means, what you need to do is to provide an appropriate venue that can take the limited number that we are. In fact, we are only 16 political parties. You have indicated that we should bring 1 person each. So if all the 16 parties are even sent to Coconut Grove, the auditorium they've been using for the various meetings, the large meetings, don't you think if EC even wants to add 10 people, we can still do a meeting and have proper discussions? We felt that was suspicious. We wrote to them, they didn't respond. So I went to that meeting expecting to get some response from the Electoral Commission. So the meeting started. They gave the opening remarks, completely disregarded what we had written to them and the concerns. So I got up and raised the concerns there that this cannot constitute a proper IPAC meeting. Any decision that is taken here may be improper. Because if we take the decision here in the morning, those who come in the afternoon may have different perspectives. And for that matter, you would be having 2 different, decisions which you have to deal with. And that cannot be the case. So we requested for information, and we suggested that you expand the meeting so that we can do a proper meeting. No response. But as it stands now, we cannot be part of this meeting. So we staged a walkout. Bear in mind that the NDC is not any small political party that will walk out from a meeting and will not know what happened. We actually followed what happened. And the records are there to show. These meetings records are kept. Nothing of that sort was discussed. And in which form would they discuss it when the thing is already in Parliament? And we have had discussions on it. In actual fact, when I raised the concerns, they told us that they didn't call us for a proper IPAC meeting, but they called us to relate an information to us. And the information was that because of the COVID-19, the April 18 registration may not come on. You get me? Then I said, if you want to relay information, you writing. So I mentioned the CI there, and it was for our notice. We already knew because it had been published. So you needn't bring us there to mention to us that you have sent amendment in Parliament and excluded the voter ID card. You understand? Now, fast forward. Let's look at the amendment itself and the contents of the amendment. The Electoral Commission are saying that this time around, when you want to go and vote, register as a voter, you need to have a passport. You need to have a Ghana card. Then you may probably apply the voucher system as the primary identification, process for qualifying to register. One, the passport. Only 2 million people are on passport in Ghana. Let's even assume that those from the ages, 1 month to 17 years are 500,000 and adults are 1.5. Let's assume that. You have the case whereby the other identification document, which is the Ghana card, had as one of the primary identification requirements the passport. So the 7 million people that you are considering, the 1.5 million people must as well, or perhaps be a subset of the 7 million. Now, statistics from the Ghana Statistical Service indicate that we have close to about 18 million eligible voters in this country. The specifics, by their estimations, now they have not done the new census, but the extrapolations give you about 17.7 million. The current register that is existing has a little up over 16 million people. So for anybody planning a registration exercise, if you don't estimate at all, you should be looking at registering 17 million people. Now you have decided, with cognizance of all the limited time that we have, to only include or restrict your identification documents to a document that cumulatively have a population of about 8 million.
For now.
For now.
Because I've spoken to the NIA, Mr. Otukuno, and they have said that at least by October, they are certain that they would have completed their assignments.
So the registration will start in October. Is that what the Electoral Commission is saying?
Not necessarily so, but they are saying that they can
Now,
do so.
the Electoral Commission are saying that when the law matures first week in June, they are going to take steps to start the registration, perhaps maybe in July. But bear in mind that the NIA used 2.5 years to distribute 7 million cards. Granted that they do not do any new registration, what is the guarantee that they can use even 2 months, the next 2 months, granted that we have 2 months to the start of the registration, use 2 months to distribute the other 4 million that is left? So ostensibly, what you have to deal with is just a little over 8 million. Now let me tell you about something about the voucher system.
Yes.
The voucher system is a process that is actually the exception and not the norm. It is not something that you use, necessarily to determine one's citizenship. So, Godfred, if you and I decide to, guarantee for a Japamesa who may be a Togolese, does that make him a Ghanaian?
I'm from Sekendi.
Or maybe an Ivorian.
As far as I know,
an Ivorian. Sekendi is closer to Ivory So an Ivorian. Does that make him a citizen?
Territorial jurisdiction of this country.
Honorable. You understand? It doesn't make him a citizen. And, Godfred, the interesting thing, which makes it very difficult to accept the logic by the Electoral Commission, is that these 3 identification processes that they have outlined, passport, Ghana card, the voucher system, are the same identification document that served as breeder basis for the new voter, the current voter ID card, but for the old voter ID card and the driver's license. So ostensibly, the document you are doubting its credibility, the document you think is not credible, is actually produced by these 3 documents that you think that they are credible. Is it not problematic? Yes. Let me emphasize let me emphasize that apart from the clear ruling by Georgina Wood in the Abu Ramadan case, which indicated that the voter ID card is the best prima facie document for identification in the country, the voter ID card is the only document that goes through strict and rigorous process of acquiring. Do you have a passport? Do you have a Ghana card? When you went for your passport, did you see MPP representative there, NDC agent there, CODIO, and other civil society organizations there? No. When we were doing the Ghana card registration, When you went to register, I do not have. I went there 3 times. I was not able to register. I don't know whether you have it. I doubt if you have, because a lot of more people do not have. I'm not sure even in Japan. Maybe he has it because they went to parliament and they registered. But the point is that when you went to register at the registration center, did you see anybody sitting there representing MPP, NDC, civil society organizations, readily challenging those who are registering? No. But the voter ID card, before you acquire it, you go through all these rigorous checks, rigorous interrogation by MPP, by NDC, by civil society organizations. And that is not it all. When the register is done and your name has been accepted onto the roll, there would be exhibition. And that will be another opportunity for people to come and challenge your citizenship. Okay. It goes through adjudication committee. Sometimes it goes through district magistrates. Sometimes it goes to the regional level where the high courts, determine your citizenship. None of these identification documents that the EC, have proposed go through any of these processes. So, Godfred, that clearly tells you the grand picture. Okay. The rigging machine, the architecture of the rigging machine that has been designed, constructed, and it is at the verge of being commissioned by the government and the Electoral Commission. And that is why we are saying that the NDC, perhaps, and all other political parties and all other well-meaning Ghanaians, religious societies, civil societies, and moral society must rise as a responsibility, as a citizen's responsibility, to protect our young, fragile democracy that perhaps may be under threat from this rigging collusion that has been designed by the MPP and Jim Mensah. Okay,
thank you very much. Peter Boamotukuno is the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. Honorable, before I'll come to you after my quick break, but you were in Parliament. The CR, was it laid on the 17th or the 19th?
I don't recall the exact date that.
Okay, check that for me because I'll come back.
So, Godfred, I can supply you that information here. But you see, the publications from the media houses, I can supply them to you.
Okay, then when I come back, it's just the time is for Honorable Mensah.
The CI, very well. Let's come.
The
back.
one that was withdrawn, and then
let's
we'll get to that. Keep sending your messages in. This is the Big Issue. Be right back.
In school. As a student, do you feel dissatisfied with how hard it is to figure out the subject you're learning? Or as a parent or guardian, do you worry that your child is struggling to understand some of the subjects in school? Well, now you don't need to sign up for extra lessons or tutors. Simply tune in to Class Act, Mondays to Thursdays at 5:30 p.m. on City TV. Class Act is a show that seeks to enable senior high school students gain a much better understanding of what they learn in school. All you need is a TV, a chair, your notebook, and your pen. Get clarity on subjects such as maths, English, IT, and science. Class Act airs every Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on City TV on DSTV channel 363 and GoTV channel 182. Don't forget your pens, pencils, and your notebooks and tune in to Class Act, only on City TV.
City TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access City TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and StarTimes box. City TV, it's your world.
Welcome back to the Big Issue, discussing the big electoral disputes between the NDC, the EC, and the NPP over the exclusion of the voter ID card as a requirement for the acquisition of the new voter ID card. And the first part, you heard Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Peter Boamotukuno, Otukuno making it. Says Franklin Kujo is also with us. He'll come in a bit. But Honorable Member of Parliament for Second D, Andrew Japamesa is here. He's been writing copiously. Honorable, the floor is yours on this matter.
Well, I thought that you were asking about the
yes, because there has been suggestions that the CI was laid on the 17th, withdrawn, and then that meeting on the 25th was when it was discussed at IPAC, but because the NDC boycotted it, they couldn't have the opportunity to make the input. That was because
you may want me to confirm with the story online. I would just read
I'll get to you. Okay. Let me hear him.
There's some deliberate misinformation.
Okay. I am asking because he's in Parliament.
To suggest that the Electoral Commission has laid a CI or a new CI to regulate registration in Ghana. That's not true. They're only seeking to amend portions of an existing legislation that governs registration in Ghana. And the amendment, if I recall, the CI that I saw having been laid, is anything to go by. It's only 1 or 2 amendments. So the instrument that exists, CI 91, that regulates registration in Ghana is still in place, except that the EC is seeking to amend portions of it by taking out some ID requirements. So let it not be said that the Electoral Commission failed to go through some consultative process, broad-based consultative process in developing a CI that used to be the case, but this time was not done. It clearly is inaccurate. You see, our friends have said a lot, and sometimes you wonder where it is really that you ought to start responding from. But it would have been important for him to have the documents that he was brandishing, that he cited some recommendations from, 2015 documents that he claims the MPP was part of, that was seeking to work towards a permanent register, that the NPP had participated in that process and arrived at that conclusion. For him to show us exactly where those recommendations are in the text. Because it'd be strange to me that the NPP that was crying for a new register in 2015, 2016 would be party to a document that he says was authored in 2015 that had the input of the New Patriotic Party suggesting that the 2012 register should be made a permanent register. You get the point I'm making? But clearly, he has the document. If he has that recommendation, he should share it with the good people of this country.
He's going through it.
For all of us to...
From every point.
Oh, it's scattered. It's scattered all through the document. That recommendation you cannot identify as point 2.01 and read it for the benefit of all of us. For us to know that this is a specific recommendation that was made by the so-called committee that you say the MPP was party to. He cannot. You see, as far as I'm concerned, this is a very simple matter. Very simple. Godfrey, is it the first time that we're having a register in this country?
No.
Did hell break loose on the 3 previous occasions that we've held registers? Or had to go through the process of new registration? Did hell break loose?
No, maybe there wasn't a fundamental switch like
fundamental
this.
What? What's the switch? We've compiled lists of Ghanaians who are eligible to contest election, not once, not twice, not thrice, 4 times. What's the big deal? Why now? Why the threat of violence and mayhem?
I haven't heard that from Peter.
That's exactly what they've been saying. Why you are not following their media engagements?
Well, I only deal with what I hear
people
here.
Who sit on your, but when they hold their press conferences, you don't listen, and that forms the basis for your inviting us to come and discuss the issues.
Oh no.
You don't?
No, I listen, but I'm saying I've not heard that from Peter.
So I'm saying that what really is the big deal? In any event, prior to us issuing our first voter ID cards, we did Godfrey, we did it. At the time, we didn't have voters ID card, did we? in 1992. But we registered. At the time, less than 1.5 million people had passports in this country. But we registered. Did hell break loose then? So what is the big deal if the Electoral Commission, in their wisdom, decide to exclude the existing voters' ID card today, just so that they can produce a new document that cannot generate any controversy? What's the big deal? What is the big deal? But listen to them. So see, if we don't use the existing voters register, then hell should break loose. What is in the register is the question you should be asking them. That by all means, the EC ought to rely on that data to compile a new one. So what's the point? If your suggestion is that we should rely on the existing register to generate a new one, that was the point. So I would have wished that they would have stuck to their original position of cost. That as far as they are concerned, the Electoral Commission should not be spending these huge sums of money, in their view, to compile a new voters register. And stop this needless NIA Ghana passport grand scheme to, what were the words that you used? Grand criminal collusion.
Or if you want, you can add conspiracy.
Oh, you see, as far as I'm concerned, voters register don't win elections necessarily. It's the good people of this country who decide. After all, you won the 2012 election, albeit we challenged it at the Supreme Court. We won the 2016 general election. So 2020 is anybody's game. But if the Electoral Commission, in their quest to provide us with a credible election that does not lead to any acrimony, that does not lead to any tension, yes, I'm slightly worried that because of COVID, their timetable has not been fully complied with. But they've come to give us assurances that, look, within the time frame that we have, they still can generate a new register that will enable us get a credible election in December. What's the difficulty in cooperating with them to ensure that that is done? What's the difficulty? If you have a message, you preach it to the people. But the insistence that 2012 register or blood will flow, is that the way to go? Is that the way to go? You are the biggest opposition party, yes, everybody knows that. But we expect you to be responsible. Look, the Electoral Commission has a mandate. We can agree to disagree with them. And I respect the position that Imani and Co. are articulating. That's the role of civil society. But ultimately, the decision maker has to take his decision. And in this case, the Electoral Commission. And so much as I respect the position of civil society, their views and all that, sometimes I get worried that if their suggestions are not taken, then that makes the EC wrong.
Because sometimes the evidence does indicate that they hit the wall and come back to the position.
You see, I read the Special Budget Committee report, which was presented to Parliament during the budget approval process. And a line in the document struck me, that if we are going into an election and we know the nature of the competitiveness of our politicking, can get a little, heated sometimes. If the elections manager says that, look, I do not trust in the system that I'm going into the election with. My vendors have indicated to me that this system that we are using has come to its useful life's end. Should we take the the risk of going into the election without giving them the resources to put in place a system that you and I, who are going into the contest, will trust? We should leave it. Because one party says, no, I trust it. And another party says, well, I don't trust it. How are we going to come out of the election as a united front? Who is going to accept the outcome of the election in the unlikely event that it goes against your wish?
But speaking of
so you see, we should be circumspect in what it is. Look, responses have been provided to all the issues that Imani and other civil society organizations have raised. As far as I'm concerned, that should end the matter. But the insistence that it's my way or no way is worrying. After all, Imani is not the Electoral Commission.
But Imani hasn't spoken yet.
Now, I know, but I'm relating the issues to previous comments. And I was on GTV with my very good friend, Franklin, only a few days ago.
Oh, okay.
And I made the same point with Elvis. That, yes, by all means, Imani has the right to speak. I mean, I would not begrudge them. I am on his mailing list and read almost everything that they publish. Okay? Useful suggestions, by all means. But I'm saying that ultimately, the elections management body that sits where it is, and knowing the issues that is confronted with, is the one that ought to be left to take its decision. Of course, if its decision is inconsistent with law, by all means, let's proceed appropriately to get them to be placed in check. But if it's not inconsistent with law, and if they have a justification that members on both sides of the aisle approved their estimates, why are we raising issues now? Why? Look, this is the only country that we have. And I'm using this opportunity to urge my friends on the other side. The elections, maybe you guys see it as do or die. We don't. It's a contest of ideas, it's a contest of vision, it's a contest of policy. And we leave it to the good people of Ghana to choose whoever that they deem appropriate to govern this country going forward. But I am all for a credible election. I'm all for a credible election. The suggestion that the removal of Madame Charlotte Osei, and you see, yes, sometimes I blame we, the politicians ourselves, and the kinds of comments that we make sometimes. Because if it was not for some levels of comments that were made when the appointment of Mrs. Charlotte Osei took place, sometime during the Mr. Mahama era, some of these things you cannot be blamed, because we're all here. The EC commissioners' accusations that they put out in the public domain, Madame Charlotte Osei's own report to the IOCO to investigate her colleague commissioners, was it occasioned by Akufo-Addo? Was it? Was that not the basis on which somebody then petitioned in accordance with the Constitution for the constitutional process to be initiated, which then resulted in a removal? Was that not what happened? But listen to them. They make it look as if that it was Mr. Akufo-Addo, president, who then went to speak to Amadou Sule and Madame Amankwa to make those accusations against Madame Charlotte Osei in public. You saw the documents. Because some of our party people had made comments, disparaging comments, when she was appointed. And so it's convenient for the NDC to now go behind and say, this was some agenda that you had put in place right from the time that we're in position, and because you've gotten an opportunity to come to government, have gone ahead to implement. Is that factual? Is it? Godfrey, is it? But it's convenient politically to create that impression out there, which is fine. Like I said, I always leave these things to the discerning minds amongst us who can read in between the lines and see that, look, this is just hot air. NIE, the issue of the amendment bill. Read the Hansard. Look at the contribution of Inusa Fuseni, Ayariga Mahama, and then Ama Kofi-Boa in support of the amendment to take out the voter ID card and then the NHIS card. NDC members of parliament, they were vociferous in their support because it made sense. They were thinking Ghanaian that look, the truth of the matter is that because of the porous nature of our borders, some people have come in here and have enrolled on the NHIS card system. As a matter of fact, as to whether those people had ended up on the electoral roll or not, it's another issue. But when we are embarking on a national exercise of registering our citizens, it's important that at least we minimize to the farthest extent possible those who are ineligible to be on the national register. And so take those cards out because they have proven to be ones that have been abused, and demonstrably others who are not supposed to be holders of those cards have them. The following day, when that amendment passed, his leadership came to parliament. They held a caucus meeting. That was when the NDC's position changed. Yes, I'm speaking to you as a matter of fact. Because I was in the chamber. Indeed, at the time, in 2017, it was December, not 2018. I was then a member of the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee. At the committee meeting, when we were determining the urgency of the bill, they were there. Can check the committee report. It was unanimous. No objection whatsoever from the minority. Check the Hansard for the debates. Their leadership, led by their General Secretary, just as Elvis's tape has generated their opposition to the compilation of a new voters. I'm sure you heard the tape. God forbid, God forbid, God forbid. If we allow them to do a new voters register, all the monies that we are going to look for and expend on this election will come to naught. You heard the tape. That was the beginning. And he says what? The CI was placed surreptitiously before Parliament through the majority leader. I'm sure my friend doesn't know parliamentary proceedings. And so but how does a committee become seized with a document? It is laid on the floor of Parliament by the leader of the House. Because the Electoral Commission hasn't got a supervisory ministry. Otherwise, the minister or the Attorney General who is promoting that bill will be the one who will lay it before Parliament. And then the Speaker will refer it to the appropriate committee. So what are you talking about? Godfrey, when the CI was laid, what was secret about it? Media houses published it. Yeah. So why are they saying that the EC did something untoward? And that it was in secret, surreptitious? What does it mean? Is it factual? Is it factual? Is that what transpired? These are regular processes that it went through. Indeed, when it was referred to the committee, I understand that the only reason why it was withdrawn was that they had omitted to refer to another schedule in the existing legislation, and so that the reference to the voters' ID card still remained in there. And you know that when constitutional instruments are presented in Parliament, you cannot amend it. It only goes through the process, and you either reject it as a whole or pass it as it is. So there was a need because there was an obvious error. So it had to be withdrawn, and a new one with the correction resubmitted. How is that surreptitious?
Well,
but you see, our friends have taken a certain position that they would object they will oppose, they will resist, in their words, the compilation of a new voters register and damn the consequences. But I'm assured that to the extent that there's state security in this country, to the extent that there's law and order, the EC has a constitutional mandate, and to the extent that it is acting in accordance with the Constitution, it should carry out its functions as best as the people of this country are protected. And then we'll have the election come December 7th.
All right, then. You are just about a minute more to wrap.
No, it's fine.
Okay, all right then. So you've heard lawyer Andrew Ejapamensah, Member of Parliament for Second D. I will give Otukuno and lawyer Mensah a few more minutes after we hear from Franklin. Franklin has been mentioned several times, even though he hasn't spoken. Franklin, are you there?
I'm here, and
you have not even spoken yet, but your name has been mentioned several times by lawyer Mensah.
They make me look like a living legend.
But Franklin, what have you made of the conversation this week? I mean, most of the points you have last week, for instance, you spent a lot of time talking about this debate. It does not seem to go away because the NDC just won't back down from its position, which led to the press conference we saw this week. Perhaps the best question to ask now is, how do we find a middle line here, at least going forward?
Well, you know, to be very frank with you, I've become wary of the debate myself, and I suspect if we do not even take care, the people we are expecting to vote themselves may just be apathetic as well. I think this is becoming one too many. I do yield to my good friend Andrew's point that every election cycle we seem to have these kinds of problems. But we could have avoided all of this, by the way. I mean, and you see, in order not to sound like a broken record, we have almost raised our opposition to the conduct of the new voter rule anyway. And we've given many instances of our views as to why we think this is not just unnecessary expenditure, but in actual fact, it flies in the face of, you know, the very systems we have introduced in 2012. Biometrics are biometrics. If you want to say that people are ineligible, it looks to me that the only thing you can do is to ensure vigilance at the polls, really. Otherwise, this whole process of trying to by all means conduct another biometric verification, biometric register. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, except to say that everything you said still holds. Look, the whole idea that the EC has a constitutional mandate so that it is only one that has a mandate to conduct an election somehow defeats the stakeholder approach it needs to adopt as well. And I can understand perfectly if they do not want to listen to the likes of us. I mean, we don't hold any constituencies, and people do not pay taxes to us. So maybe yes. But it is also very profound that while that position has been remarkably made, that the EC has the constitutional mandate to do what it ought to do, it is within its own right to also find voices of reason to listen to. And the EC decided to set up its own eminent advisory committee, right? The moment the eminent advisory committee was engaged, and I suspect they made their contributions to the extent that, look, you've not convinced everybody about the need for a rule, they were sidelined. So if constitutionality gives you the power to be able to set aside your own eminent body of advisors, then wherein lies the likes of us? We can only keep suggesting to you to do what? To allow for negotiations. I recall my good friend he's a negotiator, I've forgotten Austin Game suggested as well that this could be done within 90 minutes. And we suggested that, well, maybe you should take those approaches as well. The this rather hallowed view that the EC is the sole repository of managing biometric verification systems, and so it knows what it's doing because there's a line in a document they presented to Parliament that, we cannot trust the integrity of the system in place based on nothing. It was not based on any audits, publishable audits. The Auditor General has not conducted an asset audit of it, an audit of its asset. So we do not even know the basis for those claims, except to suggest that because a vendor was holding some sort of a mystical key to the coding and logging, which obviously was untrue. In any case, the vendor we are dealing with was just a middleman, and we all agreed why XTL was kicked out. We support that. The developers of the biometric verification machines we have currently are in the Netherlands, right? And we know them. You could go to them and just deal with them directly. That is the way you deal with technology and biometric verification machines. The fact of the matter is that this system has delivered elections for you in a very, in a quite transparent and efficient manner. From 2012, the error rate was about 33% because it was the first time it was being used. And you remember we had to do registration, we were voting for almost 2 days. 2016, that reduced to almost 12%. In 2019, the referendum and then the district level elections returned error rates of less than 5%. So it tells you that the system was perfecting itself as a result of continuous use. Mind you, my good friend Andrew also is aware that in the very document the EC presented to Parliament, if you go back and look at the document carefully, the EC has consistently been purchasing equipment for upgrade of the systems. So between 2015 and 2019, they purchased and invested almost $60 million worth of refurbished equipment. That was the only reason why they could deliver those elections successfully. You understand? So that is why, for us, the argument still holds that the basis for saying that the biometric verification machines were obsolete on the face of the EC's own continuous investment plan, which was approved by the Finance Ministry, by the way, and its own usage of the systems, that cannot be true. We can understand if somebody wants to make some gains from some procurement gain, and I'm not ascribing any corruption-related issues here. All I'm saying is that the argument being advanced that the current register, the biometric register, is fraud with a lot of errors, cannot hold water, because the EC, by its own investment into infrastructure, persistent refurbishment, and it's all there. They purchased the DVDs and DVR. They've been purchasing some of them. So what we are saying is that you cannot tell every Ghanaian that something that deliver elections just in December, all of them is kaput. And we made the analogy of an ATM machine. The fact that a bank software may have an issue does not mean that they go uprooting every ATM machine they have across the country. It doesn't make sense. That's not the way to use your money. In any case, if you're in the private sector, in the corporate world, I would assume that is the more modest approach or prudent approach to take. Surgically identify where the problem is, fix it, and then save the Ghanaian taxpayer some extra money. The other point that ought to be made abundantly clear, really, and I still talk about this constitutionality being close with constitutionality. You recall the fact that I think the Safarijan, who also had the same posture, I recall, that you can go to court. Sometimes what I call Ghanaian bigmanism or bigwomanism is an aberration of the noble conduct of civil service or public service. There's this rather I don't know the word to use, pernicious observation that I've made, that it looks as if people who ordinarily would act in normal conduct and in conduct, as soon as they assume certain positions within public office, become teen gods and teen goddesses. And I shudder to think that this whole idea of constitutionality being mandated, and at the end of the day, they are the only ones who can deliver elections, It cannot be true. Look, as I speak, I am aware that the security services are taking, recommendations, and they are doing a lot of work to find out exactly what to do about this scenario. So I understand my good friend Honorable Andrew when he suggests that the security services will be watching. Yes, they are watching, and I suspect they are paying fidelity to their task. Is to find out exactly the extent to which these kinds of activities or they can raise the level of political tension. This tension may be cyclical, but there's none like this one actually. If you take a critical look at it, this is a situation where the EC, the so-called constitutionally clothed body, is defying almost everybody else who had tried to offer sound counsel, including its own creature, the Eminent Advisory Council. And this whole idea of legality, I like to just use an analogy I used the last time my good friend and Andrew and myself were on the GT. Now look, the French at some point in that time were thinking that, look, candlestick makers had a reason to believe that the sun was becoming a competitor to the candles. And so they went to Parliament to ask Parliament to enact a law against the sun, banning the sun from melting candlesticks. That is what is called that was what was determined and called as legal plunder. The fact that something is law doesn't necessarily mean that it makes sense. Yeah. And in the arguments you've advanced so far, the finance aspect, the very reason the EC gives, and there was even another reason they gave, that there was a need to ensure that almost everybody is certified to vote on the voter roll. And we said, well, that cannot be true. These are machines. At some point, there must be some margins of error. The deputy to the EC suggested that the margin of error of just 0.54% was too scandalous to take. When globally, for these kinds of machines, the margins of error range between 1.5 to 5%, right? So just because 33,000 persons may have been manually verified, not prevented from voting, because the machines, subject to the vagaries of the weather, could act up, should be all this because of this minute number. We should decide that we are going for a new register. And then the other last point they make, and you see the EC position keeps changing. The other point they kept making, the other point they make finally was that, oh well, the voter roll is bloated. And again, the question is, what is the science behind this? There's no data. There's no science behind it. In fact, if you look at the data from, I think the last week one that show presented it as well, consistently, there's been an average, the voter turnout has been in tandem with our population. And I also related the number of countries that have far more greater percentages when it comes to voter population per
Certainly, you did so last week.
Exactly. I don't want to bore listeners again. But you see, so the argument that the voter roll is bloated cannot even be based on science, especially now that we are dealing with biometric verification.
Okay.
The last point I'd like to make also has to do with the process. You see, managing an election, you are not just dealing with an event. The processes also matter. I think the EC has not done itself any good by this whole penchant for expunging the old voter IDs from the system. I mean, what's the point? If somebody holds an ID and even comes to register, the protocols for registering still exist. Just because you hold an old ID card doesn't necessarily mean that automatically you'll be put on the roll. So this whole, point about we need to discard that, when in actual fact, the truth of the matter is that the NIA is here to distribute not less than 6 million cards and even continue the registration. As for the passports, I don't even want to talk about it. So in terms of the processes of managing it, these things cannot be solved because you are constitutionally clothed with law. And the law does not also envisage impunity. Unfortunately, these are the hallmarks of the current EC. And I shudder to think that the security services have a lot of work to do in this election. I do not even want to start thinking that the opposition may want to boycott the election entirely, or may not even accept the results. Look, we are building a country, we want to make progress. After COVID, this economy needs to be resuscitated if the resuscitation is on its way. The last thing you want is for a significant and a major party to the election pulling out or suggesting that the election was fraud. Remember Mahama, 8 months, there was no donor giving a dime to him because we had all these challenges to the election. We cannot afford anything like that. So this is the time. But it looks as if the ship has sailed, isn't it? But the ET has vociferously tried to tell people that they should go ahead. I certainly won't be voting. I'm sorry to say. And I'm not going to register.
You're already making that declaration?
Oh, yeah, but I made it the last time as well. I won't do it because I do not believe in the integrity of the process. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Very sorry.
Quite a declaration from Franklin Kujo. Thank you very much. Let me come back in studio then and wrap up with Peter and then Honorable Mess. I think we can do 7-7 and then wrap things up. Yeah. Let's take a couple of messages. Good morning. Ask Honorable Mesa for me. What gives birth to the passport and Ghana card? NIA in itself confused the whole registration process. Why should the son turn around to confirm the nationality of the father when the constitution says you are Ghanaian if either of your parents are Ghanaian? Most of my colleagues in Sakumono couldn't register. They were told by the NIA officials that NIA opened an office for those who couldn't register to come and register. Until now, that has not happened. And those of us who have registered haven't received our cards. Only for us to hear that the requirements for registering for the voter card will be Ghana card and passport. I agree with the assertions by the NDC that many people will be disenfranchised. Godfred, I had to sleep for days at the Holy Child School just trying to register for the Ghana card. And I was still unsuccessful. I then moved to Ladma for somebody to help me register. And I was successful with that one. Good morning, Godfred. My name is Daniel from Abeka. I think using the City Voter ID card as a source document is easier than any other source document in this country. EC must rethink this. Citizen Francis says the needless war of words with the EC must stop. Elvis, a free anchor in his NDC, should leave the Electoral Commission to work in peace and go to court for redress. Also coming through, a couple more, but I will get to those. We'll also do a bit from Twitter. Let me take the Twitter messages and then I get back in studio with Mr. Otukuno. So on Twitter, deliberating fundamental matters of national interest, such as whether or not Ghana goes into a fair election with a credible register, isn't always about who wins the argument. Rather, we Ghanaians should not squander opportunities in which everybody wins. This is Kweku Esa tweeting on at Kente Kente. Thomas Citizen says, I agree with all the points the NDC is raising. EC needs to explain to us as Ghanaians why the old voters ID is not included in the registration. So that is the message that he has brought for Lionel. Mensa Arthur says, you need an additional photo ID before getting your passport. You will not be able to get your passport with only your birth certificate. He is making that particular registry clarification. And Dexmon Frimpon says, please tell Mr. Peter Otukuno and the NDC that the new register will come on. So to tell their supporters to just not to go and register. Simple. Peter, over to you.
Godfred.
You have 6 minutes.
Yeah, I thought you said 7. You've changed your mind?
No.
Okay.
I can do 7.
Okay.
I can do 7.
So, Godfred, first of all, let me clear the erroneous, rather misleading impression that the NDC is preaching violence and is preaching mayhem if the EC continues with this recalcitrant behavior of compiling a new voter register. Nobody has preached violence. We will never preach violence. Essentially, what we have preached is for the right thing to be done. And you see, you don't need to be a prophet. Yes, no, not threat at all. We have not threatened anybody. Okay. In fact, what we must understand is that, you know, when you want peace, you cannot achieve peace without a proper mix of justice and doing the right thing. You cannot achieve peace. The fact of the matter on all these, you know, claims is settled by an analogy that my boss, you know, shared with me some few days ago. It's like you have somebody carrying a cigarette and, you know, a lighter, and he has a bottle of petrol, and he's about to light the cigarette. And you tell him that, Master, this thing that you are going to do, when you light the cigarette, you will burn yourself. Then the person will turn around and accuse you and say that you want to kill me. That is essentially what Japamesa and the MPP are doing. What we are saying is that what the actions that you are undertaking, the disregard for due process, the disregard for common sense is leading to a point where you are putting our democracy under threat. I mean, it's just as simple as that. Godfred, Japamesa made some very interesting, points that we are misconstruing new CI with the amended CI. But I find it very difficult to accept that, because Honorable is a lawyer and is a member of parliament, and he should know these things. These are fundamentals. The fact of the matter is that when you amend the CI and the amendment matures, it is not amendment. It is a new CI that you have designed. In actual fact, the CI 91 was an amendment of CI 72. Mm-hmm. When this amendment matures, it becomes CI 126 or 128. You understand? So it's a new CI. So you shouldn't play with words and try to confuse people. What we are saying is that you are amending this CI. It is only one session, but it's still amendment. And after that, it will change the name of the CI, and it becomes a new CI. So we shouldn't play with words. Then again, he made mention of the fact that perhaps some of us who are saying that they surreptitiously sent the bill to the amendment to Parliament do not understand the procedures of Parliament. I'm a bit surprised, because he knows that when any state institution is sending any form of amendment to a constitutional instrument to Parliament, it doesn't go to the majority leader. It goes to the subsidiary legislation
That's
committee.
not true.
In this case, this particular amendment, first when it entered Parliament, did not go to subsidiary legislation committee. Now, let me take time to explain these few things. When the law gets to subsidiary legislation committee, which is headed by an opposition member of Parliament, they consider it and bring all the issue, call the institution responsible, ask questions where there are mistakes, they get it corrected before they send the report to the floor of Parliament, and it is late. Then it goes through the maturity period. This is commonplace. I'm sure even your reporters will know this. But for a Japamesa to be misleading us and creating the impression as if we do not understand the procedures, it's unfortunate, because it didn't go through that committee. You understand? That aside, you see, they also make the argument that this is not the first time we are doing a voter register. We have done about 4 new voter registers. The fact of the matter is that the first 3 voter registers that we did, the very first one, there was only Tom Prit on the ID card. You could not identify whether it's Godfred Akutubuafo or Peter Boamo Tukuno or whatever it is. Subsequently, we improved the register with a photo ID. The photo ID was black and white. Then the next one, we changed the photo ID to colored so that we can identify the people. So we realized that the problem of people, voting for others or people acting as imposters was still persistent. So then we needed to develop a system, a solution or IT solution to that problem. That IT solution was the creation of the biometric voter register. Now, let's ask ourselves, what is the current problem this new voter register is going to solve? Absolutely none. So all those 3 registers are not like the current register, and that is why people are worried. Now, the argument about independence of the Electoral Commission, and that, opposition parties are saying, if it is not our way, nobody's way. You see, the point we have made from the time we were in power, as espoused by President Mahama, was that the EC is independent, and at all times the EC must be allowed to do its work. In actual fact, the current situation that we have is not a situation where the EC is doing its work independently.
Why not?
The EC is not doing that because there is clear evidence that the EC is actually listening to somebody else.
Where is that
and
clear
playing
evidence?
Somebody's game.
There's a lot of conjecture and supposition, just to say, to borrow Kenatife's words, but you haven't shown clear evidence of the EC doing these things.
I think the first part of our discussions, I gave you enough to point to the fact that the EC perhaps may not be thinking for itself. Because if the EC was thinking for itself, it will not come and tell Ghanaians that we are going to use voter ID card. And all of a sudden, within a twinkle of an eye, without notifying anybody, will change its mind and exclude the voter ID card. You understand? So our position has been consistent that the EC must be allowed to do its work. What we are saying right now, with this voter register, saying no to the voter register and all that, it's not dictating to the Electoral Commission, but trying to reawaken the consciousness of the Electoral Commission to the commonsensical arguments that we are raising. You understand? And bear in mind that in this country we have laws, but we also have conventions that are established, apart from the laws, provided they are not inconsistent with the law. The EC itself established the Inter-Party Advisory Committee. The Inter-Party Advisory Committee has been in existence for over 20 years. In fact, all these 4 new registers that has been compiled was championed by the Inter-Party Advisory Committee. The question we are asking is, what has changed that in 2020, the Inter-Party Advisory Committee cannot play the role of advising or even getting involved in what we do for our elections?
Are you equating the NDC to IPAC? The NDC is part of IPAC.
Bear in mind that it is
IPAC
not
itself complain.
Godfred, it's not only the NDC that is complaining about this. You heard Franklin, and you have heard several political parties who have complained, about this register. So the point is that the Electoral Commission has abandoned the age-old convention of working together with the IPAC. Now, 2012, the current register that we have, there were 2 subcommittees of IPAC that worked feverishly towards, compiling, preparing this register. One is the technical committee of IPAC that involved the technical officials of the EC and the political parties' representation. Then the legal subcommittee of IPAC that also involved the legal team from the Electoral Commission and other political parties. They designed the CI 72 and they worked on the amendments for the CI 91. And I readily recall that this particular CI 91 that I'm holding here was worked on by a subcommittee of IPAC that involved Alaji Uduyaya, Obiamwa, and Co. You understand? What has changed? Why is it that today we are amending the law and we are not involving political parties, we are not discussing, they don't have any information? Last year, when this new voter registration thing started, we also made the point that why don't you put a technical committee of political parties together? Let's appreciate the gravity of the technical issues that you are raising. Let's make our input so that collectively we can work on this together. The Electoral Commission says, no, we don't take comments from you, we don't take advice from you, we are independent. Now, what they forget is that when you read the Constitution that gives them the independence, when you read the Constitution that gives them the independence, Article 296, it states clearly that when you are giving power of the state to work on behalf of the state, and I'm going to read the quote, Article 296, where in this Constitution or in any other law, discretionary power is vested in any person, Section 2 reads, Section B, the exercise of the discretionary power shall not be arbitrary, capricious, or biased by resentment, prejudice, or personal dislike, and shall be in accordance with due process of law. When you look at this provision of the Constitution and you look at the posture of the Electoral Commission, they are clearly in contravention of the provisions of the law, to the extent that you have Deputy Commissioner of EC coming on air to say that one political party is an existential threat to our democracy. You have a referee who is supposed to handle a match just running into the goalpost of one football team to become the goalkeeper. And you think that this is something that should be encouraged, this is something that should be supported. They have done so many things that shows clearly that perhaps they have become the opposition political party to the NDC rather than our friends in the MPP who are our opponents. You understand? Then lastly, they have said that, the EC says they don't trust the register, and the reason is that there are some NHIS cards on the register. People use NHIS cards and because they were not able to delete all that. I heard Sylvia also alluding to the fact that there is a school of thought that some of the people who are registered with an NHIS card were not deleted. That is unbelievable. Coming from the official of the EC, an official of the EC, I could take that from a Japamesa. I have here a story, if you would permit me
quickly
to read.
You have 30 seconds.
Yes, just 30 seconds. This story was published by CTFM Online. Okay. Full list of deleted NHIS registrants on the voter register. And the first paragraph reads, the Electoral Commission has released the list of 56,772 persons whose names were captured on the Electoral Register using the National Health Insurance. The reason why this was possible is that when you go and register and you give them a breeder document, it is actually captured which form of breeder document that you give them. Mm-hmm. As we speak, the current data with the Electoral Commission, they can just go into the data and identify if there is even a single National Health Insurance card registrant on that register, and they can easily delete that person. So why is that institution, the Electoral Commission, that has the power to do all these deletions as prescribed by law, is telling us that there is a school of thought, and because of that they are making this major decision because of a school of thought? Can you imagine? They have.
Let me go to Lawyer Bessa.
Just 30 seconds.
I'm giving you 30 seconds.
Just 30 seconds.
It will infringe on his time. Let's have balance. Let me go to him.
Okay. Otukuno, there will be several opportunities to speak again on this subject.
Don't worry.
You've been speaking since last year.
Don't worry. I just needed 30 seconds to make one last point.
Don't worry. Okay. Let's go. I've almost run out of time.
In fact, he doesn't have anything else to say.
When I hear political actors, particularly major political actors like the NDC, allege that somebody is breaching the law without more, I wonder really what it is that they wish to contribute to our democratic discourse. Because I would have expected that if you have basis to, as it were, prove that somebody is in breach of the law, the right thing to do is to go to court.
Frankly, I advised you on that.
No, it's important. You see, you throw out statements, you read provisions of the Constitution, and allege that the EC is in breach of those provisions. You're a political party. So you say it on a big issue and leave it at that. That cannot be right. We expect that you would make a meaningful contribution to the discourse by taking appropriate steps to get those people who you allege are in breach of the law to be brought to book. But, Godfrey, believe you me, they will never file any action in any court.
Well,
because there's no basis.
We've been told there are processes to that.
But we are already in court.
They're already in court. One of their lawyers was here last week.
No, we are already in court on this CI matter.
Nipa says there's a process in court.
No, we are actually in court. We found that you reported our
you have found what application have you filed in court? So that's different from what Mahama Yarga is also doing in Parliament.
We have filed an application in court, and I'm sure that is no news. If you don't know about that, I'll be very surprised.
No, I haven't heard it. It will be surprising to me.
What I'm saying, Nipa Kusama confirm. This is a good friend of yours. You can reach out to him.
You see, but you know them. When they file applications in court, they won't splash it all over social media for all of us to see and read it.
No, it was all over. It was even reported.
If you have a copy, bring it.
You have 3 minutes.
I haven't seen it.
Then go on.
You understand? But they will make statements in the public domain and not take steps to ensure that due process that they say they believe in and that somebody is breaching is actually followed through. It's worrying. Look, we are where we are. The Electoral Commission have issued some guidelines that they're going to follow in compiling the register. I don't see them having breached any law. I don't see them having breached any rule. Yes, people have, and why not? There are always opportunity costs to decisions that we take. I'm going to go to secondary right from here. Yeah. The opportunity cost is that I'll be leaving my kids at home. Okay, the expenditure that we're making for our elections, for the compilation of the new register, obviously could have other uses for those resources.
Like roads and hospitals.
But it's important. Democracy is expensive. That's why consistently you and I come and sit here and argue and debate. And we expect that because that is the course of governance that we've chosen for ourselves, we need to deploy the appropriate resources to ensure that we do it and do it right. I would urge all of us, rather than being offensive, to rather cooperate and work with the Electoral Commission so that we can have a register that will be acceptable to everybody going into election 2020. Because I don't see the Electoral Commission reversing their stance at this point. Or you see them reversing their stance at this point. They started the process last year. March 2019 was the first time that we heard that the Electoral Commission intends to compile a new voters register.
It's not true.
What do you mean it's not true?
Okay, well, we seem to have run out of time.
We've gone full circle.
The evidence that
I have also gone full circle.
Yes,
my time is up.
The evidence
that full circle. It's been a good show. On the second half, thank you very much, Member of Parliament for Secondary, one of our regular members, the Honourable Andrew Ejapa Mensah. Peter Boama Otukuno, thank you as well for passing through, Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. It's been a great pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Big Issue. Franklin Kujo as well, President of Imani Africa. Thank you as always for making time for us, sharing your brilliant insights on the program. My name is Godfrey Akotobuafo. Have a good weekend.